Welcome to the Arlington County Transportation Commission meeting on August 27th. It's 7:30 p.m. I'll note that. This meeting will be broadcasted via Teams, and it is a virtual meeting. As far as item 1 is citizen comment on matters not on the agenda, and we have 2 speakers. First speaker is Bernard Byrne. Mr. Byrne, you have 3 minutes.
Yes, I'm speaking, later on in the meeting, you're going to discuss agenda item 4 about the Arlington County's transportation response to COVID-19. This is kind of on the topic, but it concerns their new emergency ordinance, which is basically saying that people have to keep 6 feet apart on sidewalks if they've posted it. This is pedestrians. Well, it's not just pedestrians, because first of all, because you have a problem with cyclists use the sidewalk and motor scooters use the sidewalk. It's really a transportation issue. Now, the problem here is that the county has this emergency ordinance for outdoor seating, dining. And there it says that public sidewalks must allow a minimum of 6 feet for accessible pedestrian passage. In other words, it's only 6 feet. People walking or bicycling also have only 6 feet. Well, obviously, 2 people can't pass within 6 feet of space. They can't pass each other if the restaurant is leaving only 6 feet. And that's only, of course, if they happen to be following the order, which is some aren't. So we got a real problem here that we need to bring up. And the county board is going to be addressing to formally renew the ordinance at a public hearing in September. That's the sidewalk ordinance, the 6 feet. Well, there's a real problem with this you have to address, because the 6 feet side, in Clarendon, where they're starting it out, there are a lot of restaurants that do restrict those sidewalks to 6 feet or less. And people just can't go past each other. They can't walk 2 by 2. That's pedestrians. And as I say, it makes it even worse if there's a cyclist coming through. I mean, nobody can enter it if you have to do 6 feet. So this is a major conflict. You should prepare to bring it up at the county board meeting this coming September when they start to formalize the ordinance. Because as it now stands, saying that you just can't, you have to maintain a 6 foot distance. It's not feasible with restaurant seating. The real answer is push the restaurant seating back. The sidewalk space should be at least 12 feet. Or 10 feet perhaps, but really to pass 6 feet, keep 6 feet separation, you need 12 feet. So I'll help you address that later on in the meeting when you talk about that COVID response and prepare something for the county board meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Byrne. Our next speaker is Andrea Walker. Ms. Walker. I believe I did see Ms. Walker log in.
Is she on mute?
I don't think I see her in the participants now.
She's in the guest section.
I see an AW.
Oh, she has her hand up.
She's on unmute.
Yeah, Ms. Walker, if you could unmute.
Okay, am I unmuted?
Yes, Ms. Walker, you're live.
Yay! Whoa! I'm sorry, I tried and tried.
Quite all right. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, is that I'm a member of the Arlington Pedestrian Advisory Committee, or PAC, and like the previous speaker, I'm here to go and talk about, the county's new ordinance on physical distancing on public sidewalks. The committee is going to be sending a letter to the county manager with the following concerns. And if the Transportation Commission agrees with these concerns, perhaps it could send a similar letter to the county board. PAC finds the ordinance, just like the previous speaker said, too broad and vague and not focused on the specific issue which was passed, namely overcrowded sidewalks outside bars and restaurants, principally in Clarendon. Waiting patrons are often not wearing masks. The way the ordinance is drafted, pedestrian passing on narrow sidewalks or waiting at a stoplight could potentially be fined if they're less than 6 feet apart at all times. That could lead to selective enforcement. Also, we ask why no exception is made for people in the same family or members of the same household. The way the ordinance is drafted, families of 4 or more walking together on public sidewalks could be fined. And then why are face coverings not addressed? For example, the governor's order requires face coverings when waiting for public transport, when dining at restaurants outdoors, except when eating and drinking. And shouldn't this apply, at all public waiting areas? And if pedestrian patrons are properly wearing face coverings but cannot maintain social distancing due to limited sidewalk space, will they be subject to fines? And then finally, the ordinance puts all the responsibility on the individual pedestrian or patron not to be in violation, with no responsibility to the business and the county that may be creating the congestion. And what we're suggesting is that the order be revised through a public engagement process to better target its intended goals. And all of this is in writing so that it is, before the county manager. So it will be part of the addressed at the next board meeting. So hopefully, you will go and, write a similar letter.
Thank you, Ms. Walker.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Walker, Mr. Best, our staff liaison's email address is on our commission webpage. If you could make sure that you send CC him or send him the PAC's written letter so that it gets to me, that would be greatly appreciated.
Will do, absolutely.
Thank you.
Would you like to move to our next item?
Yes, please.
Item 2 is the Round 4 Smart Scale application to VDOT for the Arlington Boulevard safety improvements. This is an action item. I'll turn it over to staff member Rich Roisman.
Good evening, commissioners. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. Good evening. As Mr. Best noted, item number 2 is a resolution of support for the Round 4 Smart Scale application to the Commonwealth of Virginia for Arlington Boulevard safety improvements between Glebe Road and Fillmore Street. Commissioners have seen this before, but just a very brief review of Smart Scale. The SMART in Smart Scale is System Management Allocation of Resources for Transportation. The scale, we'll see on the next slide, is the evaluation criteria for the program. It is the Commonwealth's largest and most popular statewide discretionary funding program for transportation capital projects. It's extremely competitive and oversubscribed. And the main takeaway here is that it is future focused. So applications that are done now are for funding awards beginning in fiscal year 2026 and 2027. The funding criteria, again, the scale with the extra E for economic development. The criteria differ depending on what part of the geographic part of the Commonwealth you're in. What's shown here are the percentages that are in effect for Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads, where congestion mitigation is weighted the highest of the evaluation criteria for smart scale applications. We are proposing to advance a smart scale application for the one project shown, Arlington Boulevard safety improvements between Glebe and Fillmore. The request is $25.1 million. Staff elected to defer county board action on this item from July to September to allow for finalization of the VDOT STAR safety study, which underlies this project application, and through completion of that study, to take time to address several concerns raised by the Transportation Commission during its initial review of this item at your meeting on July 2nd, 2020. In addition to my presentation, following mine, there will be a short presentation from representatives of the VDOT study team. I would ask that commissioners try to hold their questions until after both presentations are completed. I'm going to introduce the folks who are with us here this evening and then turn it over to them after a few more slides. With us here tonight from the study team from VDOT Northern Virginia District are Ms. Claudia Lana, the Assistant Director for Transportation and Land Use for Arlington and Fairfax Counties, Mr. Andy Beecher, Preliminary Engineering Manager for Arlington and Fairfax Counties, Mr. Bobby Mangaleth, Project Manager in the Traffic Engineering Division, and also Ms. Dana Trone, Senior Vice President with Whitman Record and Associates, who is a consultant to VDOT on this study. Just by way of narrative detail, and VDOT's presentation will have a graphic illustrating the preferred alternative from the STAR study, which is the subject of the county's smart scale application. The preferred alternative that resulted from the study is known as Alternative 1A. It is a closed section divided 6-lane roadway on Arlington Boulevard with a raised center median, shared use paths on both sides of the street, new dedicated left turn lanes and signal heads at Irving Street, an extension of the left turn lane westbound to southbound Fillmore Street, improved access management by way of the center median, as well as some service roads that will close off residential driveways or divert them from direct access to Route 50 to the driveways through the service road, and improve bus stops and street lighting. The bus stops and street lighting are not part of VDOT's study. Those were added by the county at our choice to the smart scale application. The improvements will be at the bus stops at Glebe and Arlington Boulevard, as well as additional street lighting between the signalized intersections at Irving and Fillmore. And the county has requested that if funding is awarded through smart scale for this project, that the project be a VDOT administered project. So again, the commission raised several concerns about this potential application at their July 2nd meetings. I'm going to take some time now to go over those concerns and some responses to those before turning it over for VDOT. The first concern was that back in July, VDOT had not completed the STAR study and a proposed alternative was not identified. VDOT did publish the STAR study final report on the project website, which will be available in VDOT's presentation following public involvement. And I did send the link to that report to the commission through Mr. Best. I hope you all had an opportunity to review it. The survey results within the STAR study show a respondent preference for Alternative 1A. VDOT has identified Alternative 1A as the study's preferred alternative, and what is in Alternative 1A plus the street lighting and bus stop improvements is what is included in the county's smart scale application. Concern number 2 was about coordination on the study between VDOT and the county, and why there was no 4-lane alternative tested as part of the study alternatives. VDOT did collaborate with the county staff on the STAR study scope, and the county concurred with that. There is a framework document, which is Appendix A of the study report, that contains that information about the study scope. And memorialized in that document, that says that the improvements to be considered in the study include, but are not limited to, access management, turn lane improvements, signal optimization, coordination, intersection improvements, and pedestrian, bike, and transit improvements. Based on the comments provided in July, the VDOT study team did evaluate a 4-lane alternative using the same analytical methods from the STAR study and determined that such an alternative would cause operational and capacity problems along Route 50 within and approaching the study area. A portion of the vehicles that were suffering those capacity problems would be expected to find alternative travel routes other than Route 50, including adjacent neighborhood streets. It also found that interrupting lane continuity to go from 6 to 4 and back again would cause motorists to make last-minute lane changes and potentially cause safety and operational issues where the lanes are reduced from 3 lanes to 2 lanes in each direction. Concern number 3 was that there's no vision for Arlington Boulevard. The Master Transportation Plan, county's MTP, classifies the entirety of Arlington Boulevard as a controlled access highway. The Glebe to Fillmore study corridor is among the longest remaining undivided segments of Route 50 in the county and was selected for analysis by VDOT due to its high crash rate and other safety concerns that are documented in the STAR study. A corridor study, if undertaken, should be regional in scope and scale, be consistent with the other regional corridor studies which have been done recently, including I-66 and I-395. The MTP recommends continuing work on a community vision for Arlington Boulevard, which could take the form of a corridor study. However, the safety issues on this stretch of Arlington Boulevard need to be addressed as soon as possible and cannot wait for the conclusion of any such corridor study. Concern number 4 has to do with trade-offs, tree impacts, impervious area, and trade-off between alternatives in the study. The preferred alternative impacts approximately 20 trees and will increase impervious area by approximately 2 acres. The preferred alternative from a safety standpoint reduced the predicted crash frequency in the study corridor by 20 crashes when compared with a no-build alternative, and reduced it by 18 crashes when compared with the turn prohibition signage and right-in, right-out islands as a tactical measure at unsignalized intersections, an alternative that was tested as alternative 3 in the corridor study. The final concern indicated by the TC back in July was priorities and why not advance for smart scale VDOT Shirlington Circle improvements. Well, half of that project is in Alexandria, and when we consulted with our companion staff in Alexandria at the call for projects for smart scale, it turns out that it was not on either of our lists for high priority during this cycle, so it was not pursued. We are asking for commission action this evening on the county manager's recommendation, which will be to adopt the attached resolution of support to the staff report for the county's round 4 smart scale application to the Commonwealth of Virginia for $25.1 million for the Arlington Boulevard safety improvements between Glebe Road and Fillmore Street. I'm going to stop and take a moment to turn it over to Claudia with VDOT, but I'm controlling their slide deck as well, so give me just a moment to switch slide decks. Claudia, whenever you are ready, please go ahead.
Okay, good evening, commissioners. Rich, I cannot see, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, now I can't see what you have on the screen.
I probably stopped sharing. Give me just a moment.
Okay, thank you.
Can everyone see VDOT's presentation now?
Yes, I see the first slide. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yep.
Excellent.
Okay,
Go ahead.
thank you very much, Rich, and thank you, commissioners, and good evening. My name is Claudia Lana. I'm VDOT Assistant Director for Transportation and Land Use for Fairfax and Arlington counties. And I understand that the Transportation Commission members had questions at the July 2nd meeting, as Rich explained or referred to, about how the Route 50 STAR study was started and the coordination between VDOT and Arlington County and our staff. So I really thank you for the opportunity to share with you some background on those two questions, as well as brief timeline of the public involvement process we followed so far, summary of the alternatives and preferred alternative, which came as a result of both the analysis and public input, and what we see as the next steps beyond the study's completion. As Rich mentioned, and in case you have questions, we have other staff from VDOT and our consultant, Dana Tron from WRA, who has been leading the technical analysis and assisting throughout the study and report, in case you have questions. The segment of Route 50 covered in the study between Glebe Road and Fillmore Street in Arlington County, as you, I'm sure know, experiences congestion in the morning and evening peak periods, and perhaps more importantly, it experiences a high number of crashes. The initial data indicated that the lack of turn lanes, especially left turn lanes, were an important contributing factor. This was later confirmed by data collected for this particular study. And based on these issues, VDOT district staff from Northern Virginia, in coordination with Arlington County staff, we applied for study funding under the VDOT statewide STARS program. Strategically Targeted and Affordable Road Resolutions is the acronym for that. This program stresses the need for both VDOT and the locality, in this case Arlington County, to work together as stakeholders. It incorporates a high level of public involvement. It is also data-driven, so that alternatives that are developed, analyzed, and recommended are intended to help address the challenges identified by that data. Next slide, Rich, please. This slide, in terms of the framework document, it refers to that when we started the study with Arlington County staff, we sat down and discussed what was the purpose, what was the area to be studied, and agreed on several technical items, such as the analysis years, the tools and methodologies that we would use, the public outreach plan. That document, kind of memorializing those agreements, was signed by VDOT and Arlington County on September of 2019. The purpose of the study, of course, was to assess the operations and safety conditions and propose improvements that can be funded and incorporated into the VDOT 6-year program. These alternative and technical solutions that were evaluated were all intended to address those safety issues, to improve traffic operations and alleviate congestion. And work between VDOT and Arlington County staff has been very cooperative, and we really appreciate that participation and input from your great staff. We've had several meetings throughout the study process to discuss all kinds of things, the data, the technical analysis, alternatives to consider, and especially public input. Slide 4. Okay, in terms of the project timeline, I'm focusing here really on the outreach that we did for public involvement. Our first meeting in November of last year was in person. This is pre-COVID. We presented the data that had been gathered so far, focusing on crashes, speeds, traffic counts, access management issues, etc. And the responses that we received from the outreach for the survey that we presented came back with 3 mobility issues that the public considered were lack of left turns, difficulty making left turns. And the key issues in general were, number 1, traffic congestion, number 2, traffic safety, and number 3, pedestrian safety. So those were the findings from our survey, online survey, that was conducted between November, basically throughout November, and where we had 927 responses. The second meeting had to be done by virtual presentation because it was post-COVID, and that occurred beginning on April 30th. So what we did is we had a pre-recorded presentation. It's still available on the project webpage, as well as a survey, online survey, between April 30th and June 15th. We got even higher number of responses. And at this point, we were actually presenting the alternatives that we were considering and the issues that we saw with each. So naturally, the responses were higher. We also had a separate meeting with just community members on June 8th. It was more targeted. Several residents of the corridor attended, 39 residents, as well as 2 elected officials, including Senator Favola, who I understand had been part of the Arlington board. At that point, that we got the more consistent comment that we heard was, do not restrict turn movements at Fillmore Street and Irving. So that is consistent with what we determine as the preferred alternative that Rich referred to. Next slide, Rich, please. So I know the meeting is long and I'm not going to read all of this, but I did want to mention that at the bottom is the link to the study that has all the details about the alternatives that we looked at. And the first alternative is the preferred one, the race median with left turn lanes at Irving Street and at Fillmore Street that Rich explained in a little bit of detail earlier. Next slide, Rich, please. This graphic shows a little bit of detail on that alternative. As you can see, the median would be raised, and there would be turn lanes to approaching the signalized intersections at Irving and Fillmore. This alternative basically would reduce the crash frequency, which we had identified as one of the more serious problems. And in addition, because it provides for a race median, that would help to have a refuge for pedestrians to help them cross safely. As you know, we are also proposing shared use paths on both sides of the road, and extending the left turn lane on the northern end of the corridor. Next slide, Rich, please. The next step is, okay, we have a study with a recommendation and findings. In order for anything to be implemented, we need funding. SmartScale is the vehicle that Arlington County has selected. And in that process, funding applications are submitted by localities. VDOT is not one of the agencies that can submit applications. And I'm just including a link to that process in case you would like to see more details about it. As Richard said, he submitted a SmartScale application, and if the funding is approved, well, SmartScale is a very competitive process, but if the funding is approved, it would become available in about 5 years. VDOT has requested that the Arlington County has requested VDOT to administer that potential future project. And at that time, there would be, of course, additional public involvement. There would be an opportunity to refine the design, revise the details, update the data to the conditions of that time. And having said that, that doesn't mean that this precludes other interim improvements between now and then. Next slide, Rich. Basically, that's the end of my presentation. But if you have any questions, we're here as a team to try to respond. And again, thank you for your time.
That concludes the presentation. So turn it back over to the commission.
Great, thank you very much. So commission members, feel free to raise your hand in Teams if you would like to be called on to have a question, or if you don't have the raise hand button, you can just chat at me in the chat section. I will keep that open, and we will go forward with things that way. I believe Commissioner Buck had his hand up first. Go ahead.
All right, am I unmuted? I'm unmuted, awesome. So I want to thank VDOT, all of you, for doing the analysis in Appendix F and running the scenario on short time in VISM. I really appreciate it. I do think you opted not to present it to the public, which is your option. I personally think it should have happened, though, just despite the forecasted congestion, because it would have maximized safety and access at a low cost with less impermeable surface and other trade-offs. And our communities might have appreciated the side street queue reductions. I do have a bunch of questions, and then I'll yield the floor. So you state that the lane utilization is high. So if congestion is not a question of lane utilization of the two inside lanes, then why is there such a dramatic travel time benefit to adding left turn lanes at Irving?
Rich, would you like me to, this is Dana Trone from WRA. Rich, would you like me to respond to that?
Yes, go ahead, Dana.
Yeah, so when comparing the alternatives under consideration, there really was not a significant change in travel time between the various alternatives. It was really looking at the reduction in conflict points and the potential for crash potential. So, you know, alternative 1A was not really chosen on the basis primarily of travel time reduction. It was more on the basis of safety the reduction of conflict points, especially those involving left turns, and the potential for rear end crashes as motorists would stop in the leftmost through lane.
Okay, I mean, refresh my memory though. It even if it wasn't chosen for congestion reduction, there is a. I mean, I honestly don't remember the numbers, but I do remember there being a fairly substantial travel time benefit, and I'm just more curious about the mechanism of action of why that's happening when if lane utilization is high in those inside lanes and turn volumes are frankly they're a lot lower than I expected they would be. And we're adding a protected turn phase, I believe. It's all of that combined with the high lane utilization. The math doesn't add up to why travel times improve.
Some of the other benefit to travel time is gained with the extension of the left turn lane from westbound Route 50 to Fillmore Street, as that left turn lane, especially in the future, is going to be it's overflowing today and extending out of the through lane and impeding flow. That's contributing to the travel time reduction. Between the no build and alternative 1A, there is a little over a 2-minute reduction in travel time, as you noted.
And that, I mean, for such a short section, that strikes me as dramatic. Anyway, so diversions are cited in the final report if Route 50 was brought down to 5 lanes, but there's no mention of possible diversions from the tolled and already widening in process I-66 if Route 50 is widened to 7 lanes and gives us this 2-minute travel benefit. Your 2030 forecast assumes that no more solo drivers are going to divert from I-66 to avoid tolls, attracted by a trip that's now quicker through the study section. And why not?
As part of the scope of the study, we did not look at diversion from 66 to Route 50. In terms of saying that it's a 7-lane section, we are adding a left turn lane at Irving Street, but beyond the additional turn lane at Irving Street, that is the only location of capacity increase along Route 50.
Okay, so we all know what induced demand is. If you implement this capacity increase and Waze invented an avoid tolls feature, more drivers took Route 50 such that it congested this stretch back to the travel times where it is now, how many more drivers in the peak hour would that work out to?
I don't have that number off the top of my head. It is documented in the report. I can look that number up and maybe get back to you in a moment or two. It was not a significant increase in throughput as a result of adding the turn lanes at Irving Street.
Okay.
And if I may, this is Claudia again. I just wanted to just reiterate that one of the main things that we were looking at is the crashes. And this corridor, this piece has 21% greater number of crashes than the statewide principal arterials and 96% greater than primary roads in Northern Virginia. That's on there's additional detail on page 16 of the report. But a lot of the crashes were intersection related, and 25% were angle crashes and 60% rear end crashes. So the safety aspect is one of the key things that led us to try to find a solution or a way to reduce those crashes.
Sure.
So I think that's kind of one of the key motivating things that got us to start the study and to come up with the alternatives that we reviewed. Dana, I don't know if you have found anything in the report beyond to address Commissioner Buck's question, but I hope that helps. That adds a little bit of insight.
That's great. I will turn to safety questions because we are concerned. It's our number one priority, safety. Let's talk about speed. You didn't measure actual speeds in the peak or the off-peak, correct?
So we did conduct travel time runs during the peak periods, approximately 10 runs per direction during the peak period in each direction in the AM and the PM, as well as reviewed RIDIS data for the section within the study limits. The posted speed limit being 45 miles per hour. The RIDIS data in the off-peak period was indicating between 33 and 37 miles per hour. That is the contributing, a contributing factor to those lower speeds is that there's two signals within this short section of Route 50. So that's contributing to the lower speeds, when you're looking at an average of the speed. So motorists may be, speeding up between intersections, but the average speed over the block between the section between Glebe and Fillmore ranged from 33 to 37, looking at the RIDIS data.
Okay, but there was no screen line point speed taken, such as on the eastbound approach going under the Glebe underpass or something like that.
That's correct.
Okay. So the peak times of the crashes appear to be counter peak. There's more crashes on weekdays, like weekdays eastbound in the PM rather than in the morning. So center turn lanes are surely going to reduce crashes, but wouldn't this pattern also point to speed being a contributing factor due to uncongested conditions?
I'm not sure I completely follow your question, and you're correct that there is a higher percentage of crashes during the peak periods, but we did look, and there's crashes. 49% of the crashes occurred outside of the 6 hours that we defined as the peak period. So it's not just a peak period time, as you said, it's off peak period time in terms of crashes. But in looking at the types of crashes that are occurring, speeding was not really the predominant reason for the crashes. It was primarily related to motorists making left turns. You can say that speed could have been a factor, but it wasn't the primary contributing factor in the crash.
Mm-hmm. So moving to the survey, your online responses, how many of those were Arlingtonians or district residents?
I do not know the exact breakdown of the number that were inside Arlington. The vast percentage were. We can certainly get you those numbers, but the majority of the respondents were within the county.
Okay. That's all I had for now.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Raddick, I believe your hand was up next.
Thank you. My first question, I'm not really sure who to direct it to. Maybe VDOT would know the answer, but with COVID affecting a lot of transportation funding, how do we know, or do we know at all, will that affect the STARS funding?
If I may, I think, Commissioner, you asking about the funding to actually construct the project, which is smart scale funding, or
Right.
STARS funding for just smart scale funding. As of now, the Commonwealth has not provided an update on anticipated revenue availability for smart scale. The pre-COVID estimate was between $750 and $800 million across the Commonwealth. So again, very, very competitive, even to get 25.1 million out of it. Given that we're talking about fiscal 26 and 27, I mean, I don't want to speak for the Commonwealth or their revenue estimates, but I think given how far out we are, we can reasonably expect a decent amount of money to be made available for smart scale during this round. But that ultimately the Commonwealth will need to elect to update its revenue forecast. You may know that the General Assembly is currently in session looking at the current budget for transportation. Based on that, if they do more forecasts, they may revise downward the numbers. But at this point, we don't know anything further beyond the estimates that were given pre-COVID.
Thank you. Mr. Roisman, for the improved bus stops, can you talk more about that?
There are two concepts in play for the eastbound stops, as you know, both stops right now under existing conditions are basically flags with no concrete pads that are on the main line of US 50 east of the Arlington or the Glebe Road overpass. The proposed concept was developed by County Transit Bureau and Traffic Engineering and Operations. Going westbound would construct a concrete pad on the off-ramp to Glebe Road from westbound 50 on the north side of the off-ramp and relocate the concrete pad and the flag stop to there. So buses would exit at Route 50, make their stop, and then proceed through the signal to get back on Route 50 going westbound. Going eastbound, there are two concepts. We would need to explore those more in detailed design and make a selection. One of them keeps the stop on the Route 50 main line, but provides access via a fairly lengthy sidewalk from the Glebe Road overpass down to the stop, and constructs a pad there as well. The second concept would move the stop to the northbound Glebe to eastbound Route 50 on-ramp. To do that would require additional traffic engineering and operations analysis, because right now there is a median that prevents through movements from the eastbound to Glebe Road off ramp. You cannot go through. You need to turn either left or right. So that would need to be checked, and if feasible, the median would need to be cut back to allow that movement. So again, that would have to be worked out during final design, but those are the concepts that were explored and costed and included in the smart scale application.
Thank you. That's all.
Staff could refresh my memory, because we look at so many different pots of money with different rules and different applications. Is this one of the ones where the county ranks its requests, or is this smart scale one of the ones where we just put a couple projects forward and we don't prioritize them in any way?
Ranking is not required for smart scale.
Thank you. All right. Commissioner Lantelmi, you're up next.
Thank you, Commissioner Slatt. I have a question on the median. If 1A is in fact selected, you're talking about a 14-foot wide median. Of course, we're losing, as you mentioned, quite a number of trees. Will there be an opportunity to use that median for either stormwater or for trees to be planted? One of the things that has always bothered me about Arlington Boulevard is that it's probably the physically ugliest road that we have. There's no consistent design from one end to the other. It's a mishmash of expressway, street, boulevard, and who knows what it is. This is an opportunity for to be spending money to improve it. Will there be opportunities for us to really get into design elements, improve the design elements, rather than just simply slapping down some additional concrete and lanes?
I'll respond to that. I mean, the preferred alternative does specify moving to a closed section roadway, so it would move from the swales that you have now to curb and gutter. As for treatment of the median, I think that is something that would be worthwhile to explore during detailed design if the project receives funding.
Thank you.
Commissioner Price, you're up next.
Thank you, Commissioner Slatt. Appreciate it. And thank you for the presentations. I thought I heard, well, first, I'm pretty sure I heard that funding would not be available for 5 years on this project. And in that same breath, that there would be interim measures taken. And I was just wondering what those interim measures would be. And I'm assuming we're not talking about the bus stop improvements and everything. We're talking about other things in terms of safety.
Let me attempt to speak for VDOT, and then they can back me up in terms of what their slide content said. There is the possibility of interim measures. No interim measures are planned at this time. To do interim measures would require further consideration, discussion, outreach, and most importantly, funding. So there's nothing in this that precludes interim measures, but right now there are no interim measures planned that I'm aware of.
This is Claudia, and that's exactly what I meant when I said does not preclude interim measures. Thank you, Rich.
Commissioner Clement.
If I recall correctly, at the last meeting, some commissioners were concerned that there was no treatment in this plan for the bike trail on either side. And this bike trail is discontinuous, and there is demand to make it more continuous, or to complete the bike trail on either side of the road. So I want to know or verify that there is not going to be any additional treatment to the bike trail. And I would like to get myself feedback from other commissioners who live in that area as to whether that remains a concern with them.
For Claudia, would you like to respond to the status of the shared use paths in the preferred alternative? Or Dana?
I can do that, Rich.
Sure.
The shared use path will be maintained for the length of the project, and in the at the western end of the study corridor, between Glebe and Jackson Street on the south side, we would actually be reconstructing the trail, and that's a portion of the trail that's in I guess not as good of condition as other portions of the trail, so that would be a benefit. And then there's two service road connections that are included in the proposal that would eliminate some access points to private properties that cross the trail, so it would reduce conflict points along the trail. So it would be a betterment to the existing trail.
Thank you. Oh, I was about to. Yes, Commissioner Brose.
Yeah, I want to thank the team for this study and continuing it, because I think it really addresses some of the concerns that we were talking about. But as one who lived in that neighborhood a couple blocks from the Arlington Route 50 about 20 years ago, there were crashes happening then. They'll continue, and they'll continue for another 5 years before we actually get started work on this. So I'm really supportive of us making a stride in getting this work started.
Yeah, I want to echo. I really appreciate. I think I get the strong sense that VDOT scrambled a bit and really hustled to include some responses to our concerns in the final report, and it's greatly appreciated. I've read a fair number of VDOT reports over the last 5 or 6 years, and impervious surface impact in the grid and tree impacts in the alternatives grid are things that aren't generally used to seeing, and they're greatly appreciated, especially in Arlington. I would encourage you to bring that sort of information forward earlier in the process. As it is, your feedback is based on the information that you've provided about the alternatives, and tree impacts, impervious surface impacts, and that sort of thing was not in the information that the public saw during the survey. And so I will tell you that I would definitely say your survey responses are colored by the lack of information that you provided to the public in that phase of the project. Commissioner Buck has his hand back up again. Let's go back to him.
So, yeah, it looks like we've cycled around questions. So I wanted to dig into some issues with county staff. There was a pretty strong assertion in the staff memo that this project conformed to the master transportation plan. And earlier this week, before we got the staff memo, I was trying to quell my unease with this project, and I consulted the master transportation plan to try and just get an objective handle on where this fit into the overall scheme. So the stated purpose of the MTP is to guide those who make or explain decisions that affect Arlington's transportation network, help the public understand the rationale, and assist stakeholders who choose to advocate for better implementation of county policy. So yes, that's us. So I am looking at the right document. MTP has 6 goals and a variety of implementing strategies. Sorry, I've got a list of notes here. Only 2 of them make mention of congestion relief. One is under Goal 2, move more people without more traffic, which has a strategy to focus on minimizing person delay across modes rather than focusing exclusively on minimizing vehicle delay. And goal 5, manage effectively and efficiently, which has a strategy to manage motor vehicle congestion by emphasizing transportation alternatives, parking management, and queue management. So within the streets plan, there's a number of policy statements, each of which have implementing actions. One is utilize the plan's typology of arterial streets to guide street planning, management, design, and construction/reconstruction. So I referred to the MTP map for guidance on street design and dimensions, dated May 2019, and it shows, and I will share my screen here. And this is straight off the website. Can you see my map? This shows in blue Route 50, Arlington Boulevard. And we scroll up and we see this is not considered a controlled access highway. It's a type F arterial, which calls for 4 to 6 travel lanes, median priority high, target speed of 35 to 45 miles an hour, limited transit service, shared use path, et cetera, et cetera. So first of all, I have a concern that we are not designing to the right standard. This is May 2019, and there's nothing about this context that screams controlled access highway to me. This is lots of intersecting local streets, a middle school on one side, an elementary school on the other, and we're talking about inserting a left turn lane. This isn't a controlled access highway. It just isn't. Second concern coming from that is just this issue of design speed. We're ignoring speed on a road that the speed limit is at the top of this target speed range, and we have no idea what actual point speeds are. There's a variety of other strategies in here that I won't bore you with going over, but they all they basically, throughout the streets element and the pedestrian element, they go into great detail about reducing speeds and reducing design speeds, reducing pedestrian crossing distances, and we're not doing that. We're raising pedestrian crossing distances. We are increasing travel speeds, and I think I can go through all of these notes for you, and I won't bore you with that, but I think it's fair to say that the survey response priorities that Ms. Lana went over, which is first, left turn access, second, driver safety, and third, pedestrian safety, don't match our master plan priorities. And that gives me a whole lot of heartache. And I don't want this $25 million. This does not match our stated master transportation plan priorities in so many ways. And I don't know. I have concerns, and we can go into more discussion, or we can move to whatever.
Can county staff speak to the classification of Arlington Boulevard? Because I noted the discrepancy too. It seemed like the staff report was calling this a controlled access highway akin to 66 or 395, but my reading of the MTP map matches Commissioner Buck's.
Unfortunately, I cannot speak to different readings and conflicts within the elements of the MTP at this time. I'm happy to consult the documents again, as the commissioners have, and provide a written response back through Mr. Best.
Okay. Commissioner Reich, I believe you have your hand up next.
Yes, thank you. Just a simple question on the topic of the survey, the public engagement. Would you be able to share the racial breakdown of survey respondents?
That was not queried as part of the survey, so I'm unable to share the breakdown.
Thank you.
All right. I'm not currently seeing anybody else's hand up. So if you thought that you had raised your hand, I'm not seeing it. So feel free to just speak up right now. All right. I guess nobody has their hand up. So I will admit, a lot of my concerns have been addressed by VDOT. I no longer think it's a completely ridiculous project like I did last time around, but I also am extremely unconvinced that this is the best use for $25 million of funding if we're going to improve safety in Arlington County for transportation. $25 million does a whole lot. And this, yeah, I can't help but think that if a 4-lane cross section or other lower impact, strategic and affordable approach had been considered, that we might not be able to get 75% of that safety benefit for a lot less money than is currently being provided. So I am feeling very ambivalent right now and having a hard time convincing myself that I would vote to endorse this grant application, but also a hard time convincing myself that I would vote against endorsing this grant application. So I would love if other commissioners would weigh in on their thoughts on the matter so that we can all benefit from each other's insight. Commissioner Yeri, go ahead.
I'm with you, Commissioner Slatt. For $25 million, I don't see where the safety benefits really come from. Considering when I think about what $25 million could do in other places, it just seems absurd. And also, I find the comments that Commissioner Buck made be very persuasive, and I can't bring myself to vote for this.
Can I jump in also with a question on that?
Go ahead, Commissioner Lantelmi.
And this is something either VDOT or the county staff can answer. Did I understand the slide deck correctly that between the 1A alternative and the alternative where it keeps it as is with the side street giving the turnouts that don't allow going across, the difference between those was 20 crashes and 18 crashes? That the preferred alternative has a net gain of just 2 fewer crashes? I'm not quite sure I understood that, because if the difference was only 2, then the cost effectiveness doesn't seem to be there.
That is the difference that is documented in the report. It is 20 better than no build and 18 better than the alternative 3 that was signage and right in, right out only islands. Okay,
so there's only a net gain of 2 with the right in, right out, but there's way more with the one. The difference is 18, not 2.
Yes, and I also should point out, and I'll see if Dana would like to weigh on this, that that is not the only element of safety that was evaluated. There's also a conflict point analysis, which I did not touch on, that's contained in the report. And the preferred alternative may stack up differently against a no build and against alternative 3 in terms of that safety outcome.
Is there a difference in pedestrian crossing safety? Because right now it looks as though, given the count, that virtually nobody, if people are smart enough to know that they don't cross Arlington Boulevard except at the lights. There seems pedestrian counts at the other cross streets just don't happen. Do we have any projection as to whether any of the alternatives will be better or worse for pedestrian crossings? Other than, of course, having the safety, the shelter of having a median.
VDOT, would you like to respond to that question?
Yeah, I can speak to that, Rich. So as you mentioned with alternative 1A, there will be the raised median that would provide the pedestrian refuge, which currently is not present at the Irving Street intersection. So pedestrians crossing at that intersection, although they are allowed to cross the full width of Route 50, based on the pedestrian crossing time. If they were not able to get across, there would be a place for them to stop. The raised median, actually, as well as alternative 3, if left turns are prohibited from all the minor street approaches, to and from the minor street unsignalized approaches, it reduces conflicts with pedestrians and bicyclists that are traveling along the trail. So there's just less turning conflicts as a result of prohibiting the movements, but that would not be different between alternative 1A versus alternative 3, which is no median, but would just be channelizing islands to force right in and right out. And, one of the major concerns with that alternative was just the ability to enforce it, and how you would properly sign that, and, potentially the need for overhead sign structures to even place signs to inform motorists that they were not allowed to turn from the main line.
Right. Yeah, right. I did see that in the report. One thing that I do think is an advantage is the for the bicycle, the shared use trails is the service roads to eliminate the driveway crossings of those. That is I think a real improvement for the shared use trails that might help encourage their usage. I'm just noting that. So, thank you. I have no further questions.
Commissioner Brose, I think you're up next.
Yeah, thank you. I understand the concern about the large sum of money. I get that, but I think, as noted, and the classification of the road, which we're not able to get a clarification on. But I think Route 50, and Commissioner Buck, highlighted, Waze is now, pushing people to Route 50 from 66 for reasons, and it's become a much more traveled travel lane than, and it's not 66, it's not 295 or 395, but they're certainly much more heavily traveled than the past. I'm not sure speed is the issue, but I think safety is, given the large number of vehicles that are on that roadway now, and in a very populated neighborhood, especially in the section that we're talking about here. So again, the safety concerns really weigh heavily on me. I understand it's a lot of money for a short period of, but we've seen the statistics on the number of cars that go through there, and the crashes.
If I may, this is Claudia from VDOT. If I may just speak a little bit about funding in general. So the application that the county put forth for Smart Scale would be competing with other applications from many other localities, and of course the limited amount of funding. So the way the applications are viewed is they're evaluated based on the benefit applying to the factors that Rich mentioned, congestion mitigation, safety, and many other factors, versus the cost. So there's no guarantee that this application would be successful in this round. The next round of applications for this particular type of funds, Smart Scale, is in 2 years. So it would be the next opportunity to, if somehow you decided that this is not quite the project you want. First of all, there's no guarantee that the funding will be approved because it's competitive. Number two, the next opportunity will be in 2 years. So just wanted to mention that so you can keep it in mind in your discussions. Thank you.
Commissioner Buck, I think you're up next.
There are others with hands up, and I've talked. Leave me till later, please. I'll leave my hand up, but I want to cede the floor for the moment.
All righty. Try and go in order here. Commissioner Rich, let's go to you, and then Commissioner Yeri after that.
Thanks, Chairman. So I am pretty strongly opposed to this project. This is a highway wide. It's not like a very dramatic highway widening like we might imagine or we might see on I-66, but we are adding lanes for cars and making the highway more divided so that cars will go faster. As a result of this, I am unconvinced that this project will improve safety, especially for pedestrians. I think Commissioner Buck brought up the point that a significant number of crashes on this road are against peak direction at peak hours, meaning that by widening the road, we will be encouraging faster car speeds, which will make those crashes worse. What's more, I do not believe this will prevent pedestrians from crossing at non-signalized intersections. I think pedestrians will continue to cross at non-signalized intersections, posing themselves to danger. And beyond the sort of local safety impacts, I think that encouraging more car traffic on this section of 50 will have lots of negative impacts for our community at large. It will encourage more car commuting in general, bringing with it impacts to air quality, carbon emissions, safety, as those drivers who are passing through this area more rapidly are then able to get to other areas in their cars, causing safety problems. And lastly, I just want to remark that, I'd like to commend VDOT for considering the 4-lane alternative at all. I don't believe that it was considered seriously enough. VDOT commented that it was, I believe, and sorry, words in your mouth, rejected on the grounds that it caused congestion. I believe that causing congestion, that is to say, slowing down cars, is an improvement. And we should not be denying proposals on the grounds that they will slow down cars. That seems kind of backwards to me. I'm opposed to this project. Thank you so much.
Commissioner Yeri, and then we'll go to Commissioner Price.
I just want to thank Commissioner Ridge for saying almost everything I was going to say. When I think I was going to use the phrase or the word tautological somewhere as to how I felt about how VDOT traded the 4-lane proposal. And I was also going to use the phrase shoveling money into a carbon pit, which is another way I feel about what is a highway widening that splits Arlington in half. It just really speaks poorly to the funding priorities of the county and the state that this is considered to be a vital safety project. And that's it. Otherwise, I would just like to second everything Commissioner Rich just said.
Commissioner Price.
I think a lot of what people have said on this from the commissioner's perspectives are just fantastic. You all have got wonderful perspective on this issue. And I mean, the first time we heard this project, it just annoyed me. Just the thought of this project just annoyed me. And then I went from being truly annoyed to now I'm like commissioners, by prioritizing cars over people, over transit especially. My emphasis is on transit. I don't believe you can improve safety by prioritizing cars. It's always been transit. It's slower speeds. But do I want to inhibit the county from obtaining money that they think that this is going to be a safety project, that this is going to improve safety along Route 50? I don't know. I mean, really, I don't know. I don't want to throw bad money onto Route 50. Good money onto Route 50 with a bad idea. But, it's $25 million. So, and it's a project, it's an application that still has to be approved. So the question is, do we want to stop the county from going forward with that application?
I just wanted to, this is Claudia. I heard widening Route 50. I think that the preferred alternative still leaves 3 through lanes in each direction, which is what in theory is what you have now. However, it adds space for left turn lanes, which are now being done out of the leftmost through lane. So the intention is not to widen the road, but rather to allow for left turn lanes, which are the ones that were observed to be causing a large number of the crashes. Of course, the footprint does get widened because it accommodates the left turns as well as the median, but it does not increase the number of through lanes in each directions. Just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Back to Commissioner Yeri.
I hear you, Commissioner Price. At the same time, I do want to tell the county not to apply for this because I want to tell them where my priorities as a member of this commission and as a person who lives here and who is deathly concerned of what happens over the next decade and heading into 2050, where our priorities need to lie. That is like what's weighing on my mind.
All right, Commissioner Buck, I think we are now back to you.
My apologies. So one last thing I found in the master transportation plans was specifically about Route 50 and the streets element. And it says in part, community concerns about other sections of the road remain, including safety and accessibility of pedestrian crossings, convenience of bus access, left turn safety, motorist speeding, and an uneven overall appearance. Preliminary work on a community vision for Arlington Boulevard has been started, but remains incomplete. County staff intends to initiate a more complete planning effort, as well as reconstruction projects directed primarily at safety improvement, better integration with the adjacent properties and neighborhoods, and enhanced accommodations for pedestrians, bicyclists, and public transit use. Let's note first, this narrative doesn't say anything about mitigating peak period intersection delay, and this project doesn't address some of those stated concerns from the master transportation plan. It raises a big red flag for me on the decision to pursue this limited project without a corridor plan. Again, it's a holistic study of this corridor would show that there are a substantial number of crashes, injury crashes on Route 50 just east of the study area, where none of the ramps to and from Washington Boulevard have merge areas. The road curves both horizontally and vertically, and much of it is on a bridge. Reducing to 2 through lanes in this study area would have enabled us to create acceleration and deceleration lanes through the area east of there and that terrible interchange, and substantially reduced crashes there. But we won't do that because at some point someone is going to say that is the crash hotspot, and they'll seek to address those, and we won't consider converting those outside lanes because it'll create a bottleneck there. So we'll have to get an expensive bridge widening instead. A holistic study might have been appropriate in order to try offsetting the widening on parallel I-66 in order to protect and improve communities and schools adjoining this corridor from emissions and safety hazards from the existing 64,000 cars a day. And that holistic study might have looked at the area west of the study area and seen all of the other 6-lane intersections that would benefit from a center turn lane and have lower volumes, and might have worked easily with a 5-lane cross section, or the big bridges and constrained right-of-ways with 6 lanes, but no median, no sidewalks, and no trail. We should start a holistic study. What we should have is a holistic study that starts by asking, how do we divert those 1,000 or so excess peak hour solo drivers off of Route 50? And that 1,000, I personally do believe the VISM numbers. That is a real concern, those diversions onto local streets. I fully believe that the 5-lane cross-section for this limited study area doesn't work. We need to study the whole corridor holistically to see how we get that excess traffic off of 50 and onto 66 or transit or work from home. Call it Transform Arlington Boulevard, in order to enable us to design a Route 50 corridor that has left turn lanes at all the signalized intersections, allows for sidewalks and trails and proper lighting for the whole corridor's length without having to widen bridges and rights-of-way, provides acceleration, deceleration lanes at the major interchanges, or maybe even starts planning to take them down, provides safe, sheltered, ADA-compliant bus stops, signalized intersection that a kid can safely cross, and a kid cannot safely cross 8 lanes, a design that encourages travel speeds in the peak and the off-peak that won't immediately kill a pedestrian who gets struck and doesn't result in disruptive queues and diversions onto the local network. That holistic study would really be truly regional, as staff asserts in their memo. That study might have observed that VDOT is widening I-66, and we should be intentionally diverting more DC-bound drivers there from this signalized arterial, where those drivers can drive in an environment with far fewer vulnerable road users, generate more revenue for the region in the process. It might also recognize the district working on congestion pricing right now, which promises to do what we should be working to do, which is reduce traffic on this unpriced arterial that divides our community. A really regional perspective would address our regional goals to give true alternatives to driving. And we would perhaps even say that 25 million on this oversubscribed pot of local grant funding that is spent on, for example, advancing the Route 7 BRT project in Fairfax is going to do a lot more good for Arlington and the region than this project. Finally, in the staff memo, you guys called it not only ill-advised, but also irresponsible not to proceed with this project. At the risk of being considered irresponsible, I am going to be casting an ill-advised vote no. And I'm going to go down the exact reasons why, so there's no misunderstanding. It was irresponsible for people to have signed a scoping agreement for a safety study that doesn't consider speed, is likely going to increase speed and increase the number of cars in the area, contradicting many of the major sections of the major master transportation plan, but also the section that explicitly identified speed as being a concern on this exact corridor. Worse, that scope agreement was signed after the county board signed the Vision Zero resolution, stating safety is our first priority. It's irresponsible to unquestionably prioritize peak hour congestion and potential diversions over that vulnerable road user safety. I don't like going along with the conclusion based on a limited scope that VDOT is presenting to us, that we have to accept moving more cars through a corridor that separates two schools, increases crossing distance, increases impermeable surface in order to make mainline left turns safer and faster. I do not want to apply to fund this fundamentally flawed project to fill pressing local needs when a more comprehensive study of the corridor is pushed off indefinitely. I do not think sinking 25 million into a spot improvement that basically determines how the rest of the corridor is going to look when we still haven't addressed that long-standing open community question of how the rest of the corridor should look and operate. I do not think it's justified to increase capacity on Route 50 while VDOT is in the process of increasing capacity on I-66. And yet at the same time, we're going to hear a presentation about how we're experiencing historic and potentially disruptive changes in peak hour driving behavior. We shouldn't give absolutely no idea or consideration to how those trends are going to affect behavior, and instead assuming without basis that driving volume is just going to grow by 2030, rather than doing the planning to ensure that it shrinks. I would not unquestionably add roadway capacity at a time when all of our local and regional goals preach reducing driving for a myriad of good reasons, and thus we're actually working at direct cross purposes to our regional partners like the district who are working on reducing cars from the road. So I am definitely against applying for this grant funding. If VDOT really sees a benefit to adding capacity in this section, I would encourage them to pursue that without our endorsement.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. Commissioner Wadsworth, you have your hand up.
Can you remind us what's the deadline for applying for the funds?
The application has already been submitted. They were due in August. If there is a decision by the board ultimately to not endorse it, we will obviously withdraw it. The resolution of supports are due October 30th for all projects.
Thank you.
Just also wanted to say from VDOT's standpoint, VDOT is not looking to add capacity on Route 50 in this part of the county. That was not the point of the preferred alternative. The focus was safety, not adding capacity.
It's the outcome, though.
All right. Two questions. I believe this is mostly for county staff. With Smart Scale, these projects are, of course, scored on a number of criteria. So does that I believe that in many ways locks in certain elements of the design. So this will have, my understanding, it would have a public process years from now once it's funded, working out final design. But is it correct to say that the key portions of the design are sort of locked in because that was how they were applied for?
I would not say they are locked in. What I would say is if there are significant changes, and I don't recall the trigger points off the top of my head, but it's largely on a cost basis. So if there are trigger points during final design that significantly change the cost of the project different than what was applied for, then the state requires it to be rescored.
Just a correction, or rather, just add that significant changes that change the benefit of the application, or if they change the cost, would be more like the application only covers what has been applied for. But if significant changes are made that change the benefit, then they would have to be rescored.
So since this is scored on reduction of congestion, if it were changed in final design in a way that no longer reduced congestion by as much, the funding would become in jeopardy. Is that correct?
It depends on, again, what is significant, and we would have to look at what the changes are and how significant they are in changing the benefits.
Great. Another question. I know the no build scenario, as far as it shows, the travel time numbers and all of that, that is assuming an increase in traffic. That's like a future number, right?
Yes, that's correct. It's for 2030.
And how much of an increase in traffic is it assuming Arlington Boulevard will see in this stretch in 2030?
I believe it's a 0.5% growth a year, but I will double check that.
Thank you. And sorry, I don't want to add another question while you're checking that number, but does VDOT ever go back and look at their prior traffic projections for all of these studies to see how close they are to correct?
I guess this is Claudia. We do travel demand model that is based on regional numbers, and those again are based on land use that the localities predict. So it is possible that the projections change, and yeah, we have seen sometimes the projections materialize much sooner in Northern Virginia. I don't know what COVID is going to be doing to our projections. So far, I guess I won't even go there because it changes everywhere depending on where you're looking at.
Yeah, I have to bring it up because I recently wrote a column because I was looking back at a study that Arlington did about Columbia Pike way back in the pre-streetcar days about whether, it would be okay to dedicate a lane to transit on Columbia Pike, and all of the modeling said, oh no, absolutely not. It will horribly, back up traffic in both directions. In 2020 was actually the horizon year. And I went and I looked at what those traffic projections were for 2020, and they were just wildly wrong. The amount of traffic on Columbia Pike in 2020 is exactly the same in this area, in the area that was under the study, as it was back in, 2000 or whatever it was when that study was done. And so I take with a giant grain of salt all of this modeling that we see that says in 2030 we'll have to, have widened things or done, we certainly can't, remove any capacity because it will be traffic apocalypse, when so many times I've seen those projection numbers be just completely incorrect. Commissioner Lantelmi, you have your hand up.
Yeah, we keep talking about a corridor study. This is for our staff. When we're talking about that, first off, is this something that it's in a work plan anywhere that is projected to be started, ended at a certain time? And is this a transportation-only look, or is this larger, something like what we did with both Columbia Pike and we're currently doing fully highway?
I will speak to what I know, which is that the recommendation for something resembling a corridor study is written in the section of the MTP that Commissioner Buck quoted. I am not aware of any such work plan for any such corridor study at this time. I will double check with management before committing to that answer, but I am certainly not aware of one at this time.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions, or a motion?
Yeah, I quote raised my hand a minute ago.
My apologies.
Just want to chime in. No, not a problem at all. Just want to chime in on the sort of need to plan this corridor as a corridor and not as a couple of blocks. This is very important. And I'm looking at Route 50 right now. It goes from Roslyn through some of our sort of pretty dense neighborhoods around Glebe, past Glen Carlin, crosses Route 7 at 7 Corners, and then goes past the Mosaic Center. It's a very wide right-of-way. This is about as strong a candidate as we have for bus rapid transit. Just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Commissioner Wadsworth.
I'd like to make a motion. Okay, certainly heard everybody's concerns, but I think it's time to vote here. So I'm going to move that we adopt the resolution of support for the county's Round 4 Smart Scale application for the Commonwealth of Virginia for $25.1 million for Arlington Boulevard safety improvements, Glebe to Fillmore.
Second.
Who was that seconded? I'm sorry, you're not on my screen. Commissioner Bros.
Yeah.
All right, is there anyone who would like to speak on the motion before us? Commissioner Clement.
Yeah, so I'm interested in what Mr. Buck has to say because of another project at VDOT of a similar cost, an identical cost. $25 million was allocated to widen I-66 westbound 10 years ago. And I was equally exercised about it at the time, so much so that I opposed it in court. But essentially, the argument of other cool heads was that this expenditure, this was a spot improvement, was done in the absence of a corridor study. And 10 years have now elapsed, and the history of it is that that spot improvement failed. And because it failed, we've now told I-66. In other words, I don't think VDOT ever acknowledged it, but basically the spot improvements didn't do what they were supposed to do. Okay, I don't want to go into the whys and wherefores, but it was the same amount of money. It was a spot improvement, and it was done in the absence of a corridor study. So that sways me because, as you know, I was and am very sympathetic to the safety issue that this is supposed to address. So, but yeah, you know, I went through this with I-66 westbound widening 10 years ago. And I assure you that there is a correlation or a connection between the fact that that project failed and that we have a tolled interstate today as a result. Oh, and by the way, they ultimately did do a corridor study after the fact.
Would anyone else like to speak on the motion? All right. All those in, well, hold on, I have to go down through my list. My apologies. I forgot. Voting is hard. All right, I failed to prepare and I do not have my list of commissioners in attendance in front of me, so I will forget one of you inevitably and you'll have to remind me. So all of those in favor of endorsing the county manager's recommendation, which is to recommend that the board apply for $25 million in smart scale for this project. Commissioner Buck.
No.
Commissioner Price.
No.
Commissioner Lantelmi,
No.
Commissioner Rose,
I'm going to vote yes.
Commissioner Wadsworth,
Yes.
Commissioner Clement,
No.
Commissioner Rich,
No.
Commissioner Raddick,
No.
I am also going to vote no. Who am I forgetting? Because I know there are people not on my screen. Commissioner Yeri, thank you.
No.
Are there any other commissioners present that I missed on my way down through the list? No, so that motion fails. Would anyone like to make another motion that might pass?
Yeah. How about, I would, Commissioner Lantelmi, move that we recommend that the county board direct the county manager to add to the DES's work plan to do a corridor study for Arlington Boulevard Route 50 from the Theodore Roosevelt Bridge to the Fairfax County line.
Second.
That's seconded by Mr. Price. I would like to offer an amendment to that motion that says that the commission also recommends that the board not apply for smart scale funding for this Arlington Boulevard safety improvements project.
Second.
Okay, there's a second for that amendment. Is there any discussion of that amendment? All right, all those in favor of amending the motion to recommend that the board not apply for the smart scale funding? Commissioner Buck.
Yes.
Commissioner Price.
Yes.
Commissioner Lantelmi.
Yes.
Commissioner Brose.
No.
Commissioner Wadsworth.
No.
Can see we could have predicted this as we go down through. Commissioner Clement.
Yes.
Commissioner Rich.
Yes.
Commissioner Raddick.
Yes.
Commissioner Yeri.
Yep.
And I will also vote yes. I have another amendment I would like to make to the motion. I would like to also add to this motion that the Transportation Commission recommends that the board encourage staff to involve the commission earlier in the grant application process so that commission feedback can be included before projects are submitted for pre-qualification.
Second that.
Is there any discussion of that amendment? Okay.
I would
go ahead.
I would suggest that in order to ease their workload and possible heartache with that we perhaps qualify that as just a information consultation for discussion rather than requiring formal commission action. Was that your intent, or do we want to? Should I offer that as an amendment?
I didn't want to get down into that level of detail because, you know, I'm always happy to work with staff on making a process work for everybody involved.
But that happens all the time. They come in and give info items all the time. It doesn't have to, we don't have to necessarily put it in a motion.
Yep, and that's why I said involve, not, you know, to require approval or whatever.
Did someone second that for you?
Yes, it was seconded.
Oh, okay.
Is there any further discussion of that amendment? All right. Then we will vote on that amendment. Commissioner Buck.
Aye. Yes.
Commissioner Price.
Yes.
Commissioner Lantelmi.
Yes.
Commissioner Brose.
Yes.
Commissioner Wadsworth.
Yes.
Commissioner Clement.
Yes.
Commissioner Rich.
Yes.
Commissioner Raddick.
Yes.
Commissioner Yeri.
Yes.
And I will also vote yes. All right, so we have a motion that has been amended twice. It now recommends that the board initiate a corridor study on Arlington Boulevard from the Roosevelt Bridge to the Fairfax County line, and recommends that the board not apply for smart scale funding for this project. And it recommends that the board encourage staff to involve Transportation Commission earlier in the grant application process before projects have been submitted for pre-qualification. Are there any further discussion of the motion as amended or any further amendments?
I would like to offer an amendment.
Go ahead.
Sorry, can you hear me clearly?
Yep.
Thank you. I would like to amend the motion so that to say that instead of the study ending at the Fairfax County line, to direct staff to work collaboratively with Fairfax County on a process that extends the study as far west into Fairfax County as they find appropriate, as both counties find it.
Is there a second for that amendment?
I'll second it.
Oh, there, seconded. All right. Commissioner Clement.
Yeah, this is a point of order. I thought we already adopted an amendment. You can't amend something that's already been adopted. You can offer a new resolution. This is just a point of order.
We have not voted on the motion as amended. We have voted on one amendment, and then we have voted on a second amendment to the original motion, and now it's being offered a third amendment to the original motion, but we have not yet voted on the motion as a whole.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for checking, though. Anybody else want to discuss this amendment? Okay. Then we will vote on this motion to amend that changes the scope from to the Fairfax County line to working collaboratively with Fairfax County on an appropriate scope. Commissioner Buck.
Yay. Yes.
Commissioner Price.
No.
Commissioner Lantelmi.
Yes.
Commissioner Brose.
No.
Commissioner Wadsworth.
No.
Commissioner Clement.
Yeah.
Commissioner Rich.
Yes.
Commissioner Raddick.
Yes.
Commissioner Yeri.
Yes.
And I will also vote yes. So that amendment passes by a bunch to 2. All right, any further discussion of the motion as amended or further amendments to this motion?
Just a request for you to repeat the motion.
I will do my best. The motion as amended recommends that the county board initiate prioritize inclusion in the CIP to initiate a corridor study of Arlington Boulevard from the Roosevelt Bridge, collaboratively discussing with collaboratively working with Fairfax County to determine an appropriate endpoint in Fairfax County. It further recommends that the board not apply for smart scale funding for this project that we've been discussing, and it recommends that the board encourage staff to include Transportation Commission earlier in the grant application process before projects are submitted for pre-qualification. And if that's not exactly, I will double check wording on the recording before I submit it to the board. If that captures
Right,
it all.
because it's the work plan, not the CIP.
Thank you.
The work plan, not the CIP.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Lantelmi.
Okay.
All right, any other discussion of this motion as amended?
I'm sorry, and you meant not to submit this application that was put before us tonight, right?
Right. Yes, the corridor study with the recommendation was to include it in a work plan, not in the CIP. That was my mistake. Anything else? Okay, final vote on the motion as amended. Commissioner Buck.
Yes.
Commissioner Price.
Yes.
Commissioner Lantelmi.
Yes.
Commissioner Brose.
No.
Commissioner Wadsworth.
No.
Commissioner Clement.
Yes.
Commissioner Rich.
Yes.
Commissioner Raddick.
Yes.
Commissioner Yeri.
Yes.
And I will also vote yes. That motion passes. And I believe that is the end of this agenda item.
Thank you very much
for everybody going through all of that delightful Robert's rules, and for VDOT coming out and presenting a great presentation. And thank you to Arlington County staff for answering all of our many questions.
And our next item is item number 3. This is the 2019 State of the Commute Summary Results for Arlington County. This is an info item, and Melissa McMahon from staff is here to present. Actually, I do not see Melissa.
Hi, Richard. This is Lama.
Oh, hi, how are you?
Good. I think I'm presenting on Melissa's behalf.
Oh, terrific.
Yeah.
Well, you've got the floor.
All right. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me. I'm Lama Bunjahed. I'm the research director at Mobility Lab, and I'm happy to be here to talk to you about the 2019 State of the Commute, the Arlington analysis. We commissioned it at Mobility Lab, but it was prepared by LDA Consulting in conjunction with CIT Research. And the slides are not moving. All right. So before I tell you what I'm about to cover today, I just wanted to take a brief moment to introduce us. We are a research center and communication source for transportation behavior, policy, and TDM, or Transportation Demand Management. We are a division of Arlington County Commuter Services, which is the TDM agency for Arlington County in Virginia. We are funded by DRPT, or the Virginia Department of Rail and Transportation. We design and conduct research for Arlington County. So last time my colleague and I were here, we talked to you about our collaboration with the Transit Bureau. And finally, we often partner with research subcontractors to complement our resources. And for this one, it was LDA Consulting. So today I'll be going over 3 main things. First, an overview of what is the state of the commute. Then I'll walk you through 5 key results that I chose. And then we'll conclude what do we do with the results we have here, or where do we go from here. And I just want to mention that with the time I have here, I can't do justice to the comprehensiveness of the report. So I have a link here for you, or you can look for it on mobilitylab.org to really see the nuances in the results and many more results than I'll be able to cover here. So what is the state of the commute? Every 2 years since 2001, the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments conducts a regional state of the commute survey for the 11 jurisdiction Washington metropolitan region. It's a random sample survey of employed people, since we're looking at commutes. And Arlington County is one of those jurisdictions. So in 2019, out of the, I think, around 8,500 regional respondents, we had around 790 Arlington residents, 642 Arlington workers, and an overlap between the two of around 200. And historically, the survey covered content from commute mode share, so how you're traveling to work, prevalent transportation attitudes and reasons for choosing commute modes, so how satisfied you are with the transportation system and your commute, awareness and use of both sources of information, so advertisement on alternative modes such as buses and Metro Rail, and even commute assistance services that you found at employer work sites. And I think a nice feature of the survey is that It adapts to the changing landscape, the transportation landscape, so it adds new variables. This year we had variables on ride-hailing services, so Uber, Lyft, etc., tolled express lanes, and driverless cars. So my first key highlight is on mode choice. And what we found is that Arlington residents and workers are driving alone less compared to previous years. So if you look at my chart to the left, and you look at drive alone between 2016, it dropped from 44% in 2016 to 41% in 2019, and transit went up from 38% to 40%. This is for residents, people living in Arlington. For workers, there was also a drop, but it was from 55% in 2016 to 47% in 2019. And if you compare it to the region, and these are my tables to the right, you notice that for both residents and workers, drive alone is lowest for Arlington, and bus or train is highest for Arlington compared to all of region except for the District of Columbia. My second key highlight is on telework. And what we found is that Arlington residents are teleworking more compared to previous years, but also compared to the region. So if you look at my chart to the left, which shows the percentage of commuters who teleworked between 2007 and 2019, both for people living in Arlington and working in Arlington, that percentage increased between 2016 and 2019. And what was interesting is that when non-teleworkers, or people who identified themselves as non-teleworkers, were asked whether their work was telework appropriate, 61% of people living in Arlington said their work was, and 59% of people working in Arlington said there were. So this shows that there's even more potential for telework among non-teleworkers. And one last thing I want to mention on this slide is that, of course, teleworking is not homogeneous across the population. So we saw high rates of telework among middle working age groups, so between 35 and 44, people who use alternative modes such as transit, walk, bike, non-Hispanic white, people with longer commutes, people with higher income, and working for larger employers. All right. My third key highlight is on commute satisfaction. And what we found is that Arlington residents are more satisfied with their commute than regional averages. So if you look at the chart to my right, which looks at satisfaction with commute, so when we asked respondents whether they're satisfied or not, 64% of people in Arlington said they were either satisfied or very satisfied. And that's higher than all the region except for the District of Columbia. But we also saw that satisfaction with commute actually differs by mode. So people who bike or walk to work are more satisfied. 92% of them rated their commute satisfaction between a 4 or 5, so satisfied or very satisfied. Then bus and metro rail, and all of these are more than the average for Arlington, except for drive alone and carpooling. My fourth key highlight is on transportation and commute assistance services. So what we found is that Arlington residents have access to and use a variety of transportation services and commute assistance. So we asked people whether they recalled ads on transportation, and if they did, we asked them if they recalled specific messages. So if you look to the chart to the left, and the lightest blue is people who don't recall advertising. You see that region-wide, there were more people who did not recall advertising than the people who live in Arlington or worked in Arlington. As for commute services, we also saw that residents and workers in Arlington had a high percentage of people living in Arlington or working in Arlington had at least access to one worksite commute benefit than the whole region. And the reason this is important is because we're seeing that these services are supporting behavior change. So for instance, we saw that 14% of respondents who heard transportation ads tried or started using a new alternative mode for commuting. That's a modest percentage, but it's important that it's a a change in the right direction. For commute assistant, we also saw lower driver alone rates or with more commute assistance offered at employer work sites. So if you look to the chart to my left, in dark blue is when services are offered, and light blue is when services are not offered. And you see that driver alone rates are lowered when services are offered, and then bus use and train use is higher. And then when we looked at whether a combination of commute benefits could be helping reducing drive alone or transit, we saw that the best combination was when there was no free parking offered at the employer work site and there were commute services. So this is when drive alone in dark blue was lowest and transit used in light blue was highest. And my last key highlight is on driverless cars. And that's a new variable that was just added this year. It was not in the 2016 survey. And what we found is that Arlington residents are familiar with the concept of driverless cars and more interested than regional commuters in its use. So we saw that 95% of those who lived in Arlington and 91% of those who worked in Arlington said they were either very familiar or somewhat familiar with driverless cars. And you can see the chart to the left, to the right, that they were given 5 different scenarios for using driverless cars, whether it's riding a driverless taxi or ride hail, so driverless Uber, driverless bus shuttle, renting a driverless car, buying one, or using it as car share. And for all of them, more people in Arlington were interested than the region. And that might be showing that there's a higher level of willingness to experiment with new modes compared to the region. And so to recap, I just wanted to give you a high-level overview of the results we have. But as I said before, I do encourage you to look at the report and review the full set of results to really get a comprehensive sense of commute in Arlington. In terms of how do we use the results or where do we go from here. Like in the past, we hope that this is used to inform policy and planning in Arlington. I know that DES uses some transportation performance measures from this report, but it's also, I think, a nice case examples of the impacts of travel demand management on travel behavior, since it is well documented in this report. And one last unplanned benefit of this report is that it actually provides a nice benchmark for the post-COVID era since this data was collected in 2019. And with that, I thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions if you have any.
All right, thank you very much. Commissioner Buck, I believe, has his hand up first.
Yeah, just a quick question on your key finding number 4. If you wouldn't mind bringing your slides back up if you can. Sorry.
No problem. Here. Can you see it now?
I can, yes, yes. So if we go to number 4, the parking one.
4 is.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. There was a parking one somewhere. There we go. There we go. Awesome.
It is under 4, so you're
okay. I'm sorry. I just wanted to look in detail at those bar graphs on the right. I had a friend who worked with this data set on her dissertation, and her finding was that basically the most determinative factor in a commute to work mode determination was the presence or absence of free parking. And I'm trying to dissect these. I'm a slow learner. I'm trying to ingest these bar graphs as I go. And it looks like that holds that. I can't see the bottom one, but it looks like your highest non-drive alone modes are exclusive of commuter services offerings. The presence of paid parking at your work site is it's the strongest determinant of your mode choice. Is that a fair characterization?
I think it's a combination of both. So you're talking about the lowest drive alone rate, right? Which is this one, the lowest bar.
Yes.
Yes. So that is when no free parking is offered and there are commute services offered. So it's a combination of the two.
Yes.
But yes, more generally, the percentages are lower when free parking is not offered than when there is free parking. So these two are lower than the rest.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
No problem.
Commissioner Price?
I just have a question. Why the inclusion of driverless cars? Are there driverless cars roaming the streets of Arlington that I'm unaware of? It seems like you would address more of it in the technology form, where you would, ask about electric vehicles. You'd ask about all sorts of kind of vehicles, but specifically driverless, who cares at this point? As far as I know, there's not a fleet of any driverless car that's out there. So I don't understand the inclusion in this commuter survey. I'm not commuting. No one in the driverless cars showed up. A car hasn't just showed up at my house to pick me up, to take me anywhere. At least not now, because I'm stuck at home. But why driverless cars?
So it's fair to say that there are other technologies that could have been studied here, like electric vehicles, et cetera. But I will say that we were not part of scoping this survey. This is a survey that's scoped and collected by the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments. We just commissioned a study on the Arlington portion of it, on the residents and workers. But I don't think it's wrong to be studying driverless cars, even if we're not seeing fleet here, since all of this is to be used for planning for the future. But yes, other modes and other technologies could be included too.
So they're familiar with the concept.
Yes.
So that shows that we're an educated region. Fantastic.
I would say
we got education. We got that going for us.
I think it shows that you're open
we have that too,
to new
but this
modes.
is just genius.
Commissioner Wadsworth.
Yeah, I was actually just going to make a very similar observation to what Commissioner Buck made. My takeaway from this is that having access to safe, reliable transit is the number one determinant of whether or not people try to work, and number two is whether or not they can park for free. And I think there was a 24% delta. So we often talk about that on this commission and kind of assume those things to be true because you think they'd be true, but now we have a number. So I wrote that down. Thanks.
To be fair, I've thrown that information around in the past because I've seen prior versions of this report where it was also true in previous years.
I believe
you. Commissioner Rich.
Well, not to belabor the point that Commissioner Wadsworth just made, but if we could go back to that same graph, pull that up again. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we really
also,
love that graph.
Which one? The parking?
It's a good
and
graph.
Parking one.
This one?
The parking and commuter benefits one, yeah.
Yep.
So, and yeah, so my takeaway from this is that removing parking not offering free parking has a significantly greater effect than offering commuter services, but not offering free parking and offering commuter services together have a greater effect than the sum of both of them individually. So they synergize, they're mutually catalytic, which I know is a point the Mobility Lab has certainly made before, but I think it's worth just really emphasizing that the carrot and the stick. I also want to just take this opportunity to ask you, what are Mobility Lab's priorities for the next year? What do you expect to be working on, and what can we be excited about seeing?
Sure. So we're working on another regional survey, which is the household travel survey that happens every 10 years. It's also a regional survey but we buy an oversample for Arlington and we analyze it. It has more information. So that's what we will be mainly working on for the next year.
Fantastic. I've used that survey report in the past as well. So can you just clarify, so is there indeed a Arlington specific report based on state of the commute? Thanks. I will note I have looked for it on Mobility Lab's website and I have
it was hard to find.
Still not been able to find it. The main state of the commute report unhelpfully includes Arlington with all of the other inner ring suburbs, which makes it very difficult to ferret out any Arlington specific information. But that's why Mobility Lab is awesome and makes an Arlington specific version of the report if you can find it. So if you could send Mr. Best a direct link or attach it so that he can forward it out, that would be fantastic. Commissioner Brose, I believe you had your hand up as well.
Yeah, another observation I noted, you said this would be a great benchmarking sort of pre-COVID for 2019, and especially around the teleworking, people who indicated they would like to telework more. Again, I know in just myself and my own agency, I think we've been home for 4 or 5 months, and we don't actually anticipate ever going back full time into our offices. So I think that impact on this community specifically will be interesting to note in the next study for sure. Big travel impacts.
All right. Anything else before we move on to the next agenda item? Going once, going twice. I see no hands. I see no messages in the conversation. Thank you very much for staying up with us and presenting that information. And Mr. Best, whenever you're, well, let's see, it's been 2 hours. Should we take a quick 5-minute break before we get into our final agenda item so everybody can take care of business and whatnot? All right, we will reconvene at 9:40 by my watch, 5 minutes from now.
Gives me an opportunity to try to pull this up.
Very good, Dennis.
I want to look at my screen.
I believe we have the majority of the commissioners back. Let's go ahead and get started.
Very good. Our next item number 4, is transportation in Arlington during the COVID-19 pandemic. And we have Dennis Leach, the transportation director, here this evening.
Good evening, members of the commission. I'm here this evening to give you a brief update in terms of transportation and put in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. So first, an introduction. COVID-19 is an unprecedented, rapidly changing pandemic with significant impacts to the health and economic well-being of our community and the region and the nation as a whole. The early months of the pandemic required Arlington Transportation to reduce staffing levels in the field and find ways to ensure the health and safety of our county employees and contractors while continuing to deliver projects and services and respond to new pandemic-related assignments. The long-term effects of the pandemic on our health and safety, on transportation trends, and on the funding that supports Arlington's transportation program are not yet known. So first, who does our transportation services and facilities serve? It serves our residents, over 228,000 of them, that live in a wide variety of neighborhoods and housing types. It serves over 234,000 at-place workers, of which about 46,600 are Arlington residents, and the remainder come from the surrounding communities in the region. We have over 9,200 businesses in Arlington that range from large employers to many small businesses. And over 92% of the businesses in Arlington have fewer than 50 employees. We also have Virginia's largest concentration of hotel rooms and a large visitor market. We have over 11,000 hotel rooms, restaurants, and cultural venues that are patronized by not only our residents, but by many from surrounding communities. And then our facilities are used by through commuters. All of these user groups were impacted by the governor's state of emergency and the stay-at-home orders and business closures. So first, a little bit in terms of the overall trends, the experience that we've had to date, and I really want to highlight the first part of the chart, which is mid-March to roughly around Memorial Day. This was a period where we went from no cases to a couple of traceable cases to wide-scale community spread. And I will note, Arlington, as of today, has a little over 3,450 plus cases. We've had 454 hospitalizations and 138 fatalities. That's as of today. What is noteworthy is that 2/3 of those cases happened between March 17th and Memorial Day weekend. About 82% of all the hospitalizations occurred during that period, and 83% of the fatalities. What you see in the chart is the beginning of the governor's phased opening, phase 1, phase 2. We saw declines during that period, but as things reopened and people got a little bit more relaxed about COVID, our numbers have started to trend up a little bit. And in terms of who it affected, it really started with travelers. It then transitioned to healthcare workers and people living in our senior living facilities, assisted living facilities, rehab centers. It then transitioned in April, May to essential workers. And more recently, we're seeing younger cases of people in their 20s. This next graphic shows the disparity of impacts. So not all neighborhoods in Arlington fared the same in terms of COVID cases. And what you see is, in this case, the Columbia Pike Corridor had the highest percentage of cases per 100,000 residents, and a particular concentration in the Arlington Mill neighborhood. Second was 22203, that is Ballston, but a lot of that is driven by Buckingham, a garden apartment neighborhood immediately to the south and a little bit west of Ballston. And then we look at COVID. It did not impact parts of our community evenly. It had a disproportionate impact in terms of our Latino population, 44% of all cases, and it had an additional impact on our African-American community. And then we look at the deaths, and the story here is really those who were over the age of 70, and mostly in these congregate settings, senior living facilities, assisted living facilities, bore an outsized share of our fatalities here in Arlington. So that's a little bit of a snapshot on the health side of this, on the pandemic. There was also a companion major economic impact from COVID. Arlington's unemployment rate, which is generally the lowest in the region, went from about 1.9% in February, which is pre-COVID, to 7% in April, before dropping back to 6.1% in May, and now down to about 5.9% in June. Those numbers just came out today. And it really understates the impact on Arlington employment, since so much of our workforce comes from the surrounding region. And most of those places, the unemployment rate went well over 10% and are still quite elevated. Economic Development surveyed our business sector, and over 40% of all the businesses that responded to the survey, and I believe there were in excess of 400 respondents, had to lay off staff during the pandemic. Most of the hotels closed in March and are only starting to reopen, and occupancy levels are not even close to recovering. We're currently at 23.1% in June, as compared to a little over 75% last year. And it's no surprise, travel in and out of National Airport, a major gateway to Arlington, is extremely low, off about 94%. The county actually issued a small business grant program to really help our small businesses keep the doors open. And they were ranked in terms of impact and ability to stay open. And so you see the types of businesses that actually were recipients of county grant awards, really spread throughout all of our commercial districts: Roslyn, Ballston, Columbia Pike, the Richmond Highway corridors. So what happened with transportation, traffic, and safety? No surprise, traffic volumes were down. You can see in the graph, week 11 was the governor's stay-at-home order, a pretty pronounced drop in traffic and resulting crashes. So you see the March to May timeframe, but I would say that pedestrian, bicycle, travel safety is still extremely important and needs to be a continued focus, even in this time of reduced travel. So I now want to transition to the staffing side of this and the program side. So COVID-19 had some very distinct impacts on Arlington transportation operations and staffing. By mid-March, we were in a rapidly evolving health emergency in Arlington and the region, with rising case numbers and hospitalizations, inadequate testing, and a critical shortage of PPE. I will tell you, I haven't used the acronym PPE very often in my 34 years of practice before this spring. It's now something that comes up almost every day. Governor Northam declared a state of emergency for Virginia on March 12th. Our county board followed on March 13th, and all county emergency support functions were activated, including transportation. So our initial focus in this early part of the pandemic was to try to align our operations with the governor's declared state of emergency, our local state of emergency, and stay-at-home orders. We had to implement immediate measures to support the health and safety of transportation staff and the contract workforce. And then we also took steps to preserve the continuity of service delivery across a whole host of services, including transit, paratransit, commuter services, signal operations, street lighting, permitting, inspections, and the list goes on. So these are some of the actions that were taken. We shifted all courthouse plaza-based work to remote operations right after the declared state of emergency. We shifted all of our inspections, of which we do many, to remote. So people reported from their homes to work sites and back with assigned cars. We worked with our partners in inspection services and zoning to basically overnight shift the entire plan review and permitting function to a virtual system, which meant everything from payment processing to issuance of permits, all done online remotely. In transportation engineering and operations, we looked at our very small field units and made the decision that we really needed to pare back the staffing. So a fully staffed signs and markings crew is 8 staff, was reduced to 4, including the supervisor. That crew maintains approximately 45,000 regulatory signs, 2,000 in-street flex posts, 127 crosswalk bollards, and they also provide all the oversight for pavement markings for remarking arterials and basically the entire paving program. We also cut back the Signal ITS streetlight crew. At full staffing, that's 10. It was reduced to 5, while still having to maintain the full portfolio of Signal ITS and streetlight operations. And the intent there was really to preserve the integrity of those units. If COVID got into one of our small work groups, we could lose the whole group. And so we would put the crews on rotation, and crew members that were not working were on standby at home, available for call-in, but basically quarantined. The same approach was taken with Arlington Transit, working with our contractors. Arlington Transit was scaled back to a modified Saturday schedule while still preserving a 7-day-a-week service on high ridership routes to support essential workers. We reduced weekday bus operator staffing from 105 to 46, and following the same approach that we took with TE&O, placing the remaining operators on a rotation to reduce field exposure. And for all those working in the field, from TE&O staff to bus operators to mechanics, it was providing a sufficient supply of personal protective equipment so they could do their work safely. We developed enhanced safety protocols for commuter stores. We did not close any, but we did actually modify the operations. We also worked with our Capital Bike Share operator and other member jurisdictions to create enhanced cleaning and disinfection measures for all bikes and kiosks. We did not take Capital Bike Share out of service. We kept it going. And then we actually took on additional assignments due to COVID. Transit implemented enhanced cleaning disinfection protocols for all ART buses and worked with our contractors to establish enhanced cleaning and disinfection of all of our STAR paratransit service vehicles. I'm not going to click on it, but we do have a 10-minute video produced by ACCS and Arlington Transit in terms of the measures we took to improve safety on our buses. They also implemented rear door boarding, free fare, passenger seat designations for social distancing on ART buses. In transportation engineering and operations, we planned and implemented the automated pedestrian signal phasing, which means getting a walk cycle without pushing a button in all the urban corridors. And then we ended up deploying signage to all those corridors. We also received over 400 business requests for pickup drop-off zones to support small business during the governor's directive. and ultimately implemented over 170. So this is taking out existing on-street metered parking spaces and converting them to pickup drop-off zones. We also repurposed some on-street parking for pedestrian bypass zones. We were asked to support the review and approval of temporary outdoor seating permits. Community Planning, Housing and Development, it was the lead agency, but we were also a reviewer and implemented those pedestrian bypass zones. And then all bureaus are currently heavily engaged with Arlington Public Schools on developing a transportation plan for back to school. This ranges everything from walk-bike audits of every school to developing traffic management plans around all the school campuses. So I next want to get at the specific request for temporary street closures, which we received, I believe, starting in the month of April. And we considered those requests in the larger framework of the county's emergency response to the health crisis and the ensuing economic crisis. We first looked at staffing other resources across county departments, including the manager's office, environmental services, and police. As I mentioned on a prior slide, in basically from mid-March to June, our signs and markings crew was cut from 8 to 4. So less staff and actually more work. We also evaluated our inventory of cones. We had 100 cones in our program. We then looked to police. They have about 18 to 20 uniformed officers on a shift, so that's a day shift and then an evening shift. They had about 250 cones. And the consultation between the departments was that short-term measures, particularly using cones or barrels, actually is relatively ineffective unless there is staffing present to monitor those installations. So we considered staffing and resources. We also considered operational issues, the need to provide ongoing transit service on our arterial streets. And there was also a need to continue to provide emergency access for police and fire on our street network. And then we also had a discussion about equity considerations. Are we addressing the needs of the parts of the community that were most affected by the crisis? The conclusion of that, we were short on resources, and from a staffing standpoint and a resource standpoint, it made more sense to try to get less labor-intensive permanent installations done than to attempt to pull off temporary measures. We did focus on continuing to deliver the base work program. So during COVID-19, transportation to continue to deliver services and advance plans and projects across the organization. There was no lapse in any service area during any time in the first 6 months of the pandemic, even with reduced staffing levels. Some functions actually became more efficient. Engineering plan review and permitting operations actually accelerated because there were fewer interruptions with people working remotely. We also found that capital project construction continued, and there were some efficiencies gained due to reduced traffic levels. And we continued to pursue safety improvements through pavement markings and other civil work. But to be clear, operations had been affected. We have a pretty substantial capital maintenance backlog due to the increasing staffing levels that we put in from March through to the first week of June. That shows up in fading pavement markings, bollards that need reinstallation, for example, signs that are down that aren't replaced. So those are things that need some attention. And then certainly we were really challenged with continuing community engagement for capital projects and planning projects, given a shift to a completely virtual environment. It basically added time and staff intensity to almost everything. So I want to leave you with some things that were delivered during this very, very difficult time. At the beginning of the pandemic, we finished the final landscaping markings for Clarendon Circle, a project that widened sidewalks and created improve pedestrian and bicycle accommodation. Lynn Street, Esplanade, and the Custis Trail improvements were completed in May. We implemented new sections of bike lanes on Clarendon Boulevard, North Roads to North Oak Street. We reintroduced e-bikes to the Capital Bike Share system. You will see the black bikes actually pretty frequently out and about in the last month or so. We also implemented a lane management plan for Potomac Avenue. This was of interest to the community. We managed to actually get all of that remarked, and it is in place now. We continued construction on Columbia Pike Multimodal at the west end, and you can begin to see much improved sidewalks in a section of Columbia Pike that desperately needed it. And we also started construction on some projects, including Ballston Multimodal, which ultimately will improve transit and pedestrian and bike accommodation at that important location. So lastly, I want to just point out some challenges that we have looking ahead into the fall of 2020. We are still in the pandemic. It has not gone away. We have, on average, about 20 new cases every day. Fortunately, the fatalities and the hospitalizations have dropped off, and we hope that continues. But we are continuing to look at the fall, where we go into both flu season, and we still have COVID with us until there's a vaccine. And if it gets sufficiently bad, it may trigger looking at our staffing levels again. We need to maintain the overall health and safety of our county employees and our contract employees as they continue working during the pandemic. And then we have to really work on how do we continue and expand equitable community engagement. When a number of members of our community are really preoccupied with the basics of job security, paying the rent, finding enough food, things that we don't often see in Arlington, but they are absolutely here. On the transportation front, absolutely we need to really look carefully at what this large-scale shift to telework means as we go into the fall. And we're also starting the school year with virtual school, probably transitioning to a hybrid model later in the fall. We have challenges for Arlington and the region if our transit ridership does not recover to pre-pandemic levels. Transit is our top investment for Arlington in the transportation system. Our community is really built on good transit. Then we have some financial impacts to look out for. The sustainability of WMATA is incredibly important for Arlington. If ridership and associated passenger revenue doesn't materialize, it creates a huge problem for all of the compact members, possibly as soon as the end of the calendar year. And then for our own program, all of our external funding sources have been affected. So we really need to look at what that means for our program going forward. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you. Mr. Best, do we have a speaker on this item?
Yes, we do. It is the one and only speaker is Scott Penowitz. Is Scott still with us? I believe he is.
Now, can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. And
all right, mute button is having a little bit of trouble, but good to be here. Thank you very much. My name is Scott Penowitz. I'm the Government Affairs Manager at the Arlington Chamber of Commerce, and kind of let me, set out by, noting that I think we all here have the same goal. We want to promote public safety and look for really constructive ways to do it. And, I want to compliment Arlington County for a lot of the creativity, and Dennis brought that out in his presentation with things like the pickup drop-off zones and temporary outdoor seating areas, which of course we've acronymed up. And that is a great way that we've been able to think outside the box about how we can try to preserve jobs, preserve our livelihoods, and stay safe. Unfortunately, one direction that Arlington County has taken in the past month, which runs against that, is what I think we're all referring to it as the sidewalk ordinance, and that is the ordinance against congregating on certain marked sidewalks currently only in Clarendon, though we are hearing talk about Crystal City being added to the list. The challenge here is that it's a bit misdirected in terms of the problem. That what's happening is people are seeing queues out in front of restaurants, and I think our gut is to say, oh, these restaurants must be hopping, that's why there are queues. Actually, the restaurants are very diligently enforcing the Forward Virginia capacity rules. So as a result of there being fewer patrons indoors, more people are coming outside, and that's creating a bit of a crowd. Restaurants are responsible for what happens indoors and not outdoors, though they've been trying to work on areas. And what we are worried about is that the way this has been constructed in really trying to target particular restaurant areas, albeit without restaurants being responsible for the outside, could have a severely deleterious impact on the businesses of these restaurants. And understand, when I talk about the businesses of these restaurants, I'm talking about local entrepreneurs and their employees. We have a lot of jobs at stake here. We have started to see a little bit of creativity. I know there have been some TOSA applications to use space for queuing. I think we can be constructive, but unfortunately to date, the approach the county has taken has not been particularly constructive, because it has really gone after and kind of pointed out, here are things that we would do that could lead to a fine. This is going to be difficult, if not impossible, to enforce equitably, and that's another concern that we have. So after 3 months of closures and still limited capacity, we want to make sure that we can be safe, but also try our best to keep our restaurant businesses going. Targeting customers risks the livelihood of the entrepreneurs and their employees. We really want to see Arlington work on constructive alternatives to this. We've been engaging with the county, and therefore, as the Transport Commission looks into this, we'd encourage a recommendation that the county not adopt this as a permanent emergency ordinance at its meeting in September. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pedowitz. All right, now things are with the commission. So if you have questions for Mr. Leach or comments for Mr. Leach, raise your hand or put your hand up in the chat. I just want to kick things off by saying, first off, thank you, Mr. Leach, and please extend a thanks to all of your staff. As someone who has run a business through COVID, I have experienced the need to completely change how you do every single thing that you do, and adapt to a changing circumstance, and how stressful and difficult that is, especially while a pandemic is happening. And also that it, unfortunately, while you're trying to do all of that, everybody also wants you to do new things and respond to the pandemic in new ways, which I know is was hard to deal with as a leader, but necessary. So the first question I wanted to ask before we get to other commissioners is, I appreciated your slide about how DOT had looked at requests for closing streets and that sort of thing. Do all those criteria and that discussion, does that also apply to, I know there were requests to just expand the walking area by like closing parking lanes and that sort of thing. Can you speak to the county's thoughts on those sort of requests?
Well, in the basically March to Memorial Day period, our capacity to do anything other than barely maintain what we have and put up signs was negligible. So we were really, really limited. And so any capacity had to come from some other part of the county organization. Although we did engage in those discussions, we were open to look at specific spot locations if there was a real safety of going in and intervening. We did have a little bit more capacity after Memorial Day. We started bringing staff back. We actually got some new supplies in. We continue to be very concerned about the deployment of traffic cones because without actually staff in the field, they don't stay there. So what you see out in the right-of-way now, where we've expanded or created pedestrian bypass locations, those are rubber curbs and bollards anchored to the pavement. If a vehicle attempts to drive over it, it will be damaged. And the benefit of that is that we do not have to send staff back out in the field multiple times to actually put it back in place. We can actually put it in and leave it. It's not inexpensive, and it does take some installation work, but we have done that in a number of block faces.
And then one more thing, my perception, and this appears to be not just mine. We've heard the same sentiment from Pedestrian Advisory Committee. They presented a letter at the beginning of our meeting today, and I've heard it from other people out there. There's this perception that when citizens asked for street space to be reallocated to allow safe walking and safe biking, keeping distance during this pandemic, that was unfeasible or not possible. And yet weeks later, when the business community asked for street space to be reallocated for outdoor dining, all of a sudden it was feasible or it was possible. Can you explain how is that perception wrong? Could you explain how the public should interpret what we're seeing out here on the streets?
Well, I would say again, and I go back to my phasing of the pandemic, in basically the March to Memorial Day timeframe, the capacity to do any things in the right-of-way were really quite limited. It basically was down to no parking signs or creating parking drop-off pickup zones and removing parking. We did take in some orders of rubber curbing after Memorial Day, and have put in some locations for bypass. But I think a lot of our requests were coming in the early part of the pandemic in April and May, and our consultation with across our own staff and our consultation with police, we just didn't have it. So that's what I can tell you. We did, however, continue to try to deliver things that could be actually more permanently implemented. And so I would suggest to the commission, if you're interested, go look at Potomac Avenue. We removed 2 travel lanes. Go look at Wilson Boulevard, which is currently being restriped for almost a mile out to McKinley. Again, we removed 2 of 4 travel lanes, and we don't have to send staff back out. It required engineering work. It required some community engagement to get buy-in. But from a staffing perspective, it was 1 staff inspector and a contractor crew. And once it's in, we don't have to go back. The thing that is so hard for us is that we are always staff constrained. So if we can deliver something that is durable, that has a much better payoff. The special event type closures or lane reductions for us are very difficult. And generally, when we work special events, I would say 80 to 90% of the labor effort is police overtime, not transportation. That's how they get done. Closures of streets, lane reductions, except for when we're doing like utility work, like sewer repairs or water repairs. It is generally a police operation.
All right, Commissioner Buck, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
What's different about Arlington that we weren't able to execute any temporary measures and so many others, both larger and smaller, were? And since you cited Potomac Avenue, I've been there. I would have much sooner that staff put that on the shelf, let it go back in as is, and instead react to the widespread community requests to adapt the streets to make the shutdown more sustainable for the people who are living through it. We had people coming out of the woodwork in our civic association asking for more room to be able to get outside because it was our only outlet for sanity. You mentioned equity, there's spatial equity. We have a lot of multifamily homes in our civic association. Those people did not have recreation opportunities. Parks were closed, as you might recall, and yet the streets were still operating with 5 empty lanes. There's no opportunity to get out to socially distance. A substantial missed opportunity to deliver active transportation for a wide swath of people who traditionally have never asked for it was absolutely passed up. So I guess my question is, if we have a second wave in the fall, is Mr. Pedowitz the only one who's going to get the innovation and the creativity of DES?
We will evaluate the fall when it comes, and we'll see what the circumstances are.
All right, seeing no other commissioners with their hand up yet. Let's talk about the sidewalk ordinance a little bit, Mr. Leach. Can you talk about to what extent Arlington's transportation staff were involved with, I'm sure, the county manager and the county attorney in the drafting of the sidewalk ordinance?
I would say minimal. Our role was to actually put signs in the right of way using our very limited signs and markings crew. And I would say what I know of it, it is a challenging problem. Late night, I mean, it really is very time limited and geographically limited. It really is an issue of post 10 p.m. to about 2 a.m. on Friday and Saturday night outside a handful of establishments. So what to me is remarkable is we have well over 500 restaurants, many of which serve alcohol, where there is no issue. But there are some that are particularly attractive for people coming across the region. And there was examples of belligerence, disorderly conduct, and some observations that were of real concern in terms of the fact that we are still very much in a pandemic. So it's really trying to get people to recognize that it's not back to normal at all. We are still very much in a challenging time. COVID is still spreading. We're still getting cases every day. And when you see large groups unmasked, crowded together, it presents the possibility of spread. So I think that is the thing that the board and the manager and the health director were trying to address. I leave it to the commission to make the decision in terms of how you want to advise the board in terms of what they enacted actually is addressing the problem at hand.
Commissioner Yeri, I saw your hand up.
Mr. Leach, when you say we'll see what the fall brings, it seems like today and tomorrow has already brought significant issues with crowding on sidewalks and other places. So why aren't we working to more proactively deal with those problems right now instead of just like pitching out this Hail Mary, gonna get sued over at some point sidewalk ordinance?
Can you be more specific in terms of you're looking for street closures? Is that correct?
I'm looking for more space in the urban corridors where people like me live. Because I'm going back to what Mr. Buck said. It is not a coincidence to me that myself, my neighbors, and folks like me asked for so long just to get more space on our sidewalks, somewhere safe to walk, somewhere safe to be, because we don't have the benefits of having big green leafy neighborhoods. We don't have the benefits of quiet neighborhood streets. We have the sidewalks that we've got, and the streets that we live in are still seen primarily as places for cars to go, places for cars to drive fast. And the way that the county acted towards those requests to just close a parking lane when they weren't being used, but to give us a little bit more space. At the height of this pandemic, when we were just looking to get somewhere outside for a breath of fresh air, for the little bit of exercise we had, the responses we got from the county manager's office, they were so dismissive. They were dismissive, they were disrespectful. They completely ignored the experiences of the people who are now, 60% of this county. Most of the people in this county live in multifamily housing. They live in tall buildings. They don't live in the leafy green neighborhoods, right? We don't all have big yards. We don't have quiet neighborhood streets. And for me, my experience was that the county did not care about whether or not we had somewhere safe to be. And I'm trying to square up. I'm trying to understand why. People living in these neighborhoods are just continually ignored in terms of being given a safe street experience. I'm just trying to figure out why this crisis could not convince the county to think otherwise or to try something different.
Mr. Leach, do you have a response to that, or would you like Mr. Erie to rephrase this question?
No, I heard him, and I don't really, this was an information item. I wanted to provide the commission with an update that you requested. I don't think a debate at 10:30 in the evening is particularly constructive. I want to be respectful of the commission. We are taking notes. Maybe we will schedule a follow-up. But I think entering into an intense back and forth, I'm not sure that is productive at this moment. You're actually asking us to go back and judge what we did in March and April and May.
Sorry, I'm not sure. It sounded like, not sure if you cut out or if you stopped talking. I'm sorry, Mr. Leach. It seemed.
No,
Okay.
I understand the perspective. And I will say that there were intense conversations between the county manager's office and other departments. You do have to realize that in the transportation space, our field capacity is quite limited. And it was still more limited in the first 3 months of the pandemic. And you may find that totally unacceptable. And I respect that position.
Can I just ask real quick? I feel like a lot of us out here feel like the need for more space to safely be outside has not passed. And so we're not fully understanding the focus on, months that have passed and not a focus on what the county is doing moving forward. Does the county feel differently that now that we're in phase 2 or 3 or whatever we're in, that we no longer need more space for safe walking?
I think we're in a very dynamic situation. Travel patterns are changing. I was surprised in my tour this week of how much more activity that I saw than I saw like 2 weeks ago. And I think we may see yet another change after the Labor Day holiday. So I think we monitor conditions pretty closely.
Okay. Commissioner Buck, you had your hand up.
So I'll ask a forward-looking question, and I will again go back to equity. That is not something we ever heard in any of the responses through various channels we got. Well, let's talk about transit lanes. The prevalence of COVID-19 cases co-varies pretty closely with our most transit-dependent bus corridors, particularly. Those are also the populations that are most deemed quote-unquote essential and are basically have been forced to go to work throughout the pandemic. What was done or considered to speed transit and limit onboard time for those patrons, and what might be considered again in the fall, now that we have hopefully a full operations staff and still have reduced peak hour traffic volumes, to speed buses along corridors on those high traffic corridors where we have the most disproportionate impact and the most disproportionate risk.
Right. I would say that the whole bus operation is operating under a modified approach because of COVID. We are not collecting fares. It's rear door only. And that will probably be in place through probably the end of the calendar year, or maybe even into early 2021. We are looking at transit priority, both in the metro corridors as well as Columbia Pike. But we are still in the development phase. We will ultimately have to brief the manager, the board, and do some community engagement before those recommendations are rolled out. But that is an area that we are actively working right now.
Can you give us a quick definition of transit priority? When I hear that term, I think of signal upgrades, but are we talking more generally about dedicated rights of way for transit?
It is really dedicating more space, either in the peak period or all the time for transit vehicles. And it's also, if you've been in Roslyn, creating the red bus-only lane adjacent to the metro is an example of a treatment that we are looking at applying more broadly.
All right.
Commissioner Rich, was that your hand up, or you wrote a weird word in the chat? My apologies if it was not you trying to raise your hand.
No, that I intended to raise my hand. On the topic of transit priority lanes, and the topic of reduced funding availability. By giving transit priority, we increase transit speeds, which reduces the cost necessary to serve the same community with the same frequency. That's the entire point.
Okay. Commissioner Brose, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just curious, Dennis, about the ridership levels on our buses. I'm assuming if they were pretty low. Have they picked up during the past months? Are we expecting a rise? I know you had a slide there about, concerns about the reaching pre-pandemic levels, but can you just give a sense of where we are right now?
Sure. So ART is almost back to normal service, not quite. We are carrying between 4,000 and 5,000 riders a day. 5 is generally a high mark. It's probably closer to 4. We were carrying over 11,000 to 12,000 people on an average weekday pre-COVID. So that gives you a sense of how far we have to climb back. Saturday and Sunday ridership is much higher. It's much closer to pre-COVID. Saturdays are very high. Metro bus is only carrying about 30% of normal weekday ridership, and Metro Rail, I want to say, is right now at about 11% of weekday ridership. It's really, really low, and one of the real challenges as offices start to bring some people back is to get people back on transit. The worst of all worlds is actually everyone choosing to drive alone and attempting to park at their establishments. So we're working with large employers to really say it is safe if you wear a mask, if you practice good hygiene, it is safe to ride transit. But we're going to have to keep hammering that message home. But Arlington doesn't really work well. On pre-pandemic, we were carrying 240,000 people an average weekday on rail and bus. We need to be back at that level or better post-pandemic.
Yeah, but that's so hard to imagine that could happen. Yeah. Anyway.
Mr. Leach, two really quick questions. One, do you think APS being all virtual here at the start of school is going to further impact your staffing availability?
It has some impact, but I would say what's having more of an impact is trying to help APS work through a viable transportation plan for the hybrid. Because they have the same constraints on school bus that we have on public transit, which is only getting 11 or 12 kids per bus, and some parents not being comfortable with putting the kids on the bus at all. And so one of the good things out of it is it means expanded walk zones for schools. And so we're working with them to make those viable. And it also means for those parents that choose to drive, it is not a drop-off activity. It's drive, park, walk, health check-in, and then back to the car. So it's a much more protracted operation, which is challenging. And so in effect, we're helping them develop individual transportation plans for every school.
Gotcha. And then just my second question, it sounded like there was a lot of discussion about potential street space reallocation that ultimately was decided not to go forward with a lot of it. But like, were there concrete internal proposals that were worked up, discussed, and then ultimately decided against? Or to what level was the conversation about that?
It was really looking at geographic areas, looking at corridors, looking at manning levels, looking at the types of temporary features that would have to be deployed to make any of it work. And that was principally between transportation and police.
So would you say there were no concrete internal proposals?
That's correct. We looked at various corridors and did some analysis. What would it take in terms of staffing, and what would it take in terms of barrels or cones? Although we had great concerns about any of that being sustainable without staff in the field.
All right, fellow commissioners, I don't see any other hands up. Do anybody have any final questions? Oh, Commissioner Wadsworth, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to speak on the sidewalk ordinance for a minute. You know, the first thing we heard tonight was from two people from, one a private citizen, one from a citizens group that focuses on pedestrian issues. And then we just heard from Mr. Pedowitz with the business community. And they basically have similar concerns from different perspectives about how the ordinance is constructed and whether or not it's potentially a solution searching for a problem, or whether or not it would make it unlawful for a family of 4 to walk down the street in their own neighborhood. The ordinance doesn't actually specify the location, it just says where signs are erected. So I think that's something that, obviously impacts our transportation network, where, we should be encouraging people, as this discussion has suggested, to get outside and to use the sidewalk. And, all indications for this virus, this is not the Public Health Commission, it's the Transportation Commission, are that outside is good. That's not where people are getting sick. I think the data we saw earlier in the presentation indicated that. So I'm not making a point on anything like that, just saying I think the way it's drafted, it's very vague, and it's probably unworkable. So that's my comment. Thanks.
I do generally overall agree with you, Commissioner Wadsworth, but especially given Mr. Leach's statement that DOT staff had minimal involvement with the crafting of the ordinance, I'm not sure he needs to listen to us talk about it. I think the board needs to hear what we have to say. So I would rather not dwell too much on that ordinance during this particular item, given that information. Commissioner Buck.
I share some of the concerns with the ordinance. I think there's a lot of unintended consequences, but I think they do have I think it has some very direct transportation related impacts. We can come up with any number of scenarios where, somebody doing a congregating at a bus stop could be the basis for a pretextual ticket, if you're within the signed area. I wanted to, in the discussion of the ordinance, I do think that, we have thrown around the term carrots and sticks a number of times in this meeting. The ordinance is obviously a large stick, and we have spent a lot of time spinning our wheels about carrots. It's been, gosh, over 5 months, and we're really just getting to the topic of our issues with the response in terms of providing those carrots for safe outdoor activity. I would urge if we do, I'm wholly on board with getting on board the pedestrian committee's action to write in about the ordinance, but I do feel it has to be coupled with the fact that this is a poorly conceived stick and is complemented by no carrots. So that's my core point.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. Commissioner Wadsworth, back to you.
Yeah, sure. And sorry, Mr. Chairman, I thought we were possibly going to make some kind of communication to the board about this stuff. That's what I was suggesting.
That's certainly possible.
Okay.
I believe, given Mr. Leach's statement, which squares with other conversations that I've had, that it's not really DOT's ordinance, it's the county's ordinance. I don't think it really fits in here, and I don't want to use up Mr. Leach's time talking about it, though it could certainly be discussed under other commission business, where we can pretty much talk about and even act on whatever we want.
Thanks.
So I would be happy to have that conversation if the commission would like after this agenda item. Anything else for Mr. Leach? All right, seeing no hands, thank you, Mr. Leach, for staying up with us until 10:37 to talk about transportation and COVID.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
And our next item is item number 5, other business. The only thing that staff has right now is our next meeting is October 1st, and it will also be in a virtual Teams format.
All right, with that said, I certainly know a lot of commissioners seem interested in talking to the board about the sidewalk ordinance, and it is my understanding that there will be a public hearing in September about the sidewalk ordinance to pass it as normal legislation, since last it was passed as emergency legislation, but it was not on our agenda, which I apologize, not noticing that it was not on our agenda, not having that discussion with Mr. Best. I can't blame anybody for it not being on the agenda except myself. So unfortunately, we are without, for instance, someone from the county manager's office to answer questions about the ordinance or provide that sort of further detail. But I do think it may be appropriate for the commission to take at least a general stance. My personal opinion is that it is unbelievably overbroad and likely to have lots of unintended consequences, and that those unintended consequences will fall entirely on pedestrians and entirely on anybody that the police feel any sort of desire to pick on, as with any ordinance that is unclear or lends itself to being violated by most anyone walking down the street. So I would certainly be open to writing a letter to the board if the commission supports it that says, in very general terms, that the ordinance is overly broad, is likely to have negative consequences, and is especially bad coupled with Arlington's unwillingness to provide safe opportunities for people to walk outside. With that stage set, Commissioner Wadsworth has his hand up.
Oh, yeah, I think I'd like to make a motion that you write a letter that expresses the paragraph that you just stated. It can be very brief and concise, just like you laid it out there.
Again.
I heard a second for that.
I'll second that motion.
10 seconds.
Okay. Would anyone like to talk about that motion?
Yeah, I would just mention that if you could have a couple of examples of unintended consequences for it, such as a family of 4 walking down the street, or people waiting for a bus, or where there's physically not the space to be able to walk past each other. That's clearly obviously not what the ordinance is intending, but it does need to be better targeted to what we have seen. I live in Clarendon, so I've seen the people in Clarendon, lined up or outside, and it is a legitimate issue. It's just this ordinance isn't targeting it tightly enough.
Any other discussion? Oh, wait, somebody is in the chat and I'm not there. Commissioner Rich got in first.
Thank you. I'm certainly in support of sending such a letter, but I think this seems like a good opportunity for us to really not only express those reservations, those perhaps oppositions to the ordinance, but also to say what we think should be done, and to really, set out what we believe an effective response to the coronavirus would be in terms of transportation and pedestrian safety, including things like full street closures, with, permanent interventions to ensure that drivers respect street closures. And I think we should take some time now to discuss really what we think should be in this letter, and take the opportunity to send a letter that will mean something.
Commissioner Price.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I support the idea of sending a letter. I disagree with the ordinance. I'm profoundly disappointed in the county and its the lack of expanded sidewalk access. I mean, Chris, I live in one of those communities that is the leafy green community, and I have to walk on a 3-foot sidewalk, and then when someone passes me, I have to walk in the street because I need to socially distance from people. So I feel your pain, but a complete opposite and a complete different perspective. It annoys me that they haven't done anything, and it's profoundly aggravating. But I guess the question of process, but since this is not a technical agenda item, do we need a motion?
Yeah.
Just a point of process. Do we actually need a motion to do something like this? We do.
Yes, we need a motion.
Okay.
And we have one, and it's been seconded, and it is on the floor as we speak. Yes, Commissioner Brose, and then I've got 2 other hands up after.
Yeah, I was going to echo Commissioner Lantelmi's suggestion around examples and unintended consequences. I don't want to impugn our police force, but the chances that non-white people will be affected by this in numbers greater than white people, frankly, is just a potential unintended consequence.
Commissioner Buck.
I'll kind of go a bit contrary on itemizing the different potential unintended consequences. I think I don't want to overthink this, but I think going too far into all of the what ifs of 4 people walking down the street or 4 people congregating at a transit stop, that opens the door for them to say, well, we're writing these exceptions into the ordinance and putting the language in there. And I think an overly complicated ordinance then makes enforcement of it that much more subjective. Like it makes it just, the more qualifiers we put on it, the more opportunities we have for the board and staff to say, well, we'll write in all of these exceptions, and then there's 3 more we haven't thought of, and they all are ignored by an officer on the street who, for whatever reason, has pretext to want to exercise this ordinance, and the interaction takes place. So I'm fine with itemize. I guess if we itemize them, I just want to make sure that we are not we don't try and capture every possible scenario, and that we just really hit the core of the potential for this to really get misapplied. Another point, Commissioner Rich sort of hit on well, what do we suggest? And I really do think sort of hitting at the general inattention of the county to, overall resident requests and needs, and in our community's case, concrete offers to actually provide the staffing on the ground. I think that needs to be part of it, but there's also a component of this that is maybe outside our purview, and that's addressing the root cause of queuing on the sidewalks for these establishments. If that really is a public health concern, the ordinance is the wrong answer, we know, but I struggle. I have in my mind what I think the right answer is, and that's not an answer that the Transportation Commission is necessarily qualified to weigh in on, and that is, why are 250 people allowed in a given establishment? Are the occupancy limits right? If we are attracting these large queues outside, what is happening indoors? I don't know the answer to that, but it troubles me that, we aren't able to maybe weigh in on that, as Commissioner Rich sort of hinted at.
Commissioner Yeri, I believe you had your hand up.
Yeah, and first, no slights to Commissioner Price or any of my fellow commissioners who are in leafy green neighborhoods. But second, going back to the idea of carrots, I think a thing I'd like to see touched on in this letter is why it felt like Arlington was so almost uniquely unable to cope with this challenge, while other COG governments were, or other governments that were in similar populations, similar densities, similar situations were. Why does it feel like Arlington is so on an island in how we were unable to do things like provide a little more sidewalk space or be more flexible in how we reacted to this? Like, that is the thing I'm curious about. That is because I've seen so many examples from so many other places that are bigger than Arlington, smaller than Arlington, is similar size to Arlington, other governments in the metro region that were able to find ways to do this. Why not Arlington? Like, that is the thing I am really curious about, and I really don't understand.
Yeah, I have to say, it feels like from the people I talked to in the Arlington government, the county froze, frankly, when the pandemic came. It felt like everything shut down. There was no reaction. It would be really interesting to know what their lessons learned were from that. It just, I don't think that it wasn't the reaction that we as Arlington County residents expected, to your point.
Yeah. Well, we hang our hats on smart growth. We've hung our hats on smart growth for years, since the metro was built. We've hung our hats on being a smart growth community, and then the pandemic hit and nothing. Like, where was the leadership? Where was everybody? Where was the conversation happening? I as part of the Lee Highway Alliance, I agreed with letting the businesses expand their footprints, to either the parking in front of their facilities or in their parking lot, so they could have additional capacity outside of the footprint of their buildings. I agreed with that. But then I made the argument of, well, then how are people going to get there? There have to be, if they're taking parking from people driving to these businesses, there's got to be a method for people to get there. It's walking, it's biking, it's transit if possible. And those cries fell on deaf ears. It's absolutely sad. It's maddening, absolutely maddening.
I know we could talk about this for a very long time, but it is 10:49 p.m. and there is a motion on the floor before us to send a letter that is essentially the paragraph that I had said right before that motion was made, which thankfully there's a recording of this video and I can go back. I know occasionally I will consult some of you on edits for letters. I think this is one where I will commit to you that I will send out a draft or two with time for revisions to the entire commission before it gets submitted, given the strangeness of this situation and the strong feelings among the commissioners and our lack of time to flesh out a very detailed, full, detailed sentiment, only this general sentiment. Is there any further discussion of the motion, or are there any amendments to the motion? All right, then let me get, oh, I heard somebody start to talk. Is somebody talking?
I do want to offer an amendment that the letter also include the commission's advice on what should be done instead.
Is there a second to that motion? Hearing no second, the motion fails to amend. Any other discussion of the original motion? All right, vote. Commissioner Buck.
Aye.
Commissioner Price.
Aye.
Commissioner Lantelmi.
Aye.
Commissioner Brose.
Aye.
Commissioner Wadsworth.
Aye.
Commissioner Clement, are you still here? I thought I saw Commissioner Clement drop off the call right after the end of the previous item.
Yeah, she did.
Not here. Commissioner Rich.
Aye.
Commissioner Raddick.
Aye.
Commissioner Yeri.
Aye.
And I will also vote yes. That carries unanimously for those of us who are here. Anything else for the good of the commission before we wrap this meeting up? All right, well then, thank you all. It's been a pleasure to see you. Sorry about the weird timing at the start of the meeting and whatnot.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thank you, and we'll see you October 1st.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr.
Bye.
Best.
Thanks, Mr. Best.
Thank you. Bye-bye.